And we're back. A couple minutes late. I apologize. Let's see if I can find my stream health here. Here we go. Good. Okay. So we left off page 132 of 205. So we're more than halfway through. Hopefully I'll be able to finish this in just this one sitting with one or two small breaks, and we'll rock and roll. Now we left off at a recess. It does not give a time hack. Picasso knows waves hello to all. My lovely and talented wife and technical director. So we will start where we left off with House Member Ratcliffe getting things back on the record and continuing. So, Ms. Page, when we left off, I was asking you, well, I asked you a question based on the answer that you'd given, and I asked you whether a decision had been made to charge Hillary Clinton, not to charge Hillary Clinton before or after her July 2nd, 2016 interview. And your first answer was before. You said something to the effect of, because every person, I'm paraphrasing, because virtually every person on the mid-year exam team had concluded that she wasn't going to be charged. And then, you can hear a phone ringing. Mr. Meadows, you can tell a lot about a man by his ringtone. Ms. Page, will it say boing boing on the transcript? I didn't know she had a sense of humor. That's very good. Mr. Ratcliffe, but then in fairness to you, Ms. Page, you qualified that a little bit and said, well, a final decision was made after. I want to give you a chance to be clear. Ms. Page, so the word, and I don't mean to be overly lawyerly, but when it comes naturally, so forgive me. The word decision suggests the finality. And my only point is that before the July 2nd interview, the uniform view was that there was not sufficient evidence to bring any charges against Hillary Clinton. That's not a final decision because it's not a final decision. But to that point, there was insufficient evidence to charge her with any crime. And that was uniformly agreed to by both the FBI individuals involved and the DOJ individuals involved. But that certainly, in the event, well, unlikely was our estimation, but in the event that there was some admission or some other revelation which changed our assessment, we were all open to that possibility. Well, isn't that wonderful? They were open to the possibility of Hillary Clinton throwing herself on the mercy of the FBI, screaming, I did it, please don't hurt me anymore. I can really, really believe that the FBI was holding out hope that that was going to happen. And again, even if it did, even if she did say, I did it, there was nothing going to happen because the DOJ had already said that the statute was unclear or unconstitutional, and therefore she couldn't be charged. So I don't even know why they bothered interviewing her. But it's all about appearances, I assume. Well, Mr. Comey is Mr. Upright, steadfast, through and through, class guy. So I guess he would have had the final say as to how they wanted the examination, mid-year exam, to look ultimately. And that's all it was window dressing. And that was uniformly agreed to by both the FBI individuals involved and the DOJ individuals involved. The FBI had to be browbeat into accepting that conclusion. But that certainly, in the event, unlikely was our investigation. I already read that. Mr. Ratcliffe, right. But you started your answer before about to be candid. And I think that's an important word because candor has a specific meaning when you're talking about an FBI agent, right? Candor and lack of candor. Ms. Page, everyone at the department has an obligation to candor. Yes. Mr. Ratcliffe, right. And you gave a very long explanation for, the decision, and before you made reference to the discussions. We know this went all the way back to a memo, at least a memo drafted by Director Comey on May the 2nd of 2016. And there were multiple drafts and a lot of conversation. All of that, right? Ms. Page, that's correct. Uncle Bobbity says, it's not a final decision because it's not a final decision, but we were open to the possibility of it being a final decision, but it wasn't a final decision until the final decision was made. I wish I could say you summed it up nicely, but actually you just quoted her. It's not a summation at all. So, but well quoted. Thank you. Well done. I could not have babbled it better myself. I'll back up just a tad here at the bottom of Mr. Ratcliffe's prior statement. And there were multiple drafts and a lot of conversation. All of that, right? Page, that's correct. Ratcliffe. What is a lack of candor for, what does that mean in the context of anyone associated with the FBI when they're talking to an investigator? Page, that they're being untruthful? Ratcliffe, a lack of candor? Page, yeah, a lack of candor means they're being untruthful. Ratcliffe, oh, untruthful. I thought you said being truthful. Page, oh, no, sorry. Ratcliffe, I'm sorry, I misheard you. Page, that's okay, yeah. Ratcliffe, or that they're leaving out material facts, right? Only telling part of the story? Page, sure, yes. Ratcliffe, okay. The reason I ask is, I asked that same question that I asked of you, that you gave me a very long explanation, went into great detail about how a great many factors that impacted it. I asked that same question to Director Comey under oath. Did you make the decision before or after? And his answer was after. He didn't explain it at all. He didn't qualify it at all. He didn't give any context to it. He didn't discuss a number of decisions. He didn't say, well, we made it after, but everyone had concluded, long before. Do you have any reason to give me any explanation or justification for why Director Comey wouldn't have given that information to congressional investigators or while under oath to members of Congress? Page, I don't know, sir. Ratcliffe, okay. Page, I can't answer that. Ratcliffe, we were talking about the tarmac meeting as well, and I was asking you about this email on June the 30th of 2016 that related to Bill Priestap, and you gave me the context that it was, to use your words, of being a little bit unkind. But I did want to ask, the reference to what we would do in ordinary circumstance, in parentheses, Peter Strzok says, easy, refer to PC, which you and I both think is public corruption. Was he making a joke there? I'm just trying to find out. Page, yeah. I mean, I think that you have to take this whole text in the sort of somewhat snarky tone in which it's intended, because there's nothing to do, right? Like, as I sort of described already, the investigation is what the investigation is. It is virtually over. We have seen what the evidence fails to sort of demonstrate. That's because you didn't hold anybody's feet to the fire. You gave them all immunity and let them just babble away without taking down any serious notes. There was no investigation, you idiot. To continue. And so I think, as I said, and I'm certainly not sort of proud of this, but I think it's more a reflection of, oh gosh, he's worrying again. Mr. Ratcliffe. Right. Page. And this is sort of not a basis to be worried about. And so I think that's why you have the, like, Ratcliffe, right? And all Page flippant responses at the end. Ratcliffe. Okay. And all of that is somewhat reinforced by the text message that we've talked about before that you sent the next day on July 1st about she's not exactly a profile in courage because she knows that Hillary Clinton is not going to be charged. Referring to Loretta Lynch, of course. I love it. I love it. Page, right, I think they're of a kind. Ratcliffe, yeah. Ratcliffe, but nevertheless, this tarmac meeting, obviously, it generated a lot of attention. And no one would have known about it except for that one reporter from the local station there in Phoenix having to be at the airport at that moment in time when Clinton approached the jet. I understand Clinton had to wait quite a while before he got on that jet. But he got on, and he stayed quite a while, too. And that reporter was there the entire time. If not for that one reporter, there would have been, I'm sure, no reporting whatsoever, no discussion whatsoever of Lynch meeting with Clinton. I'm positive. As I remember, she didn't take any notes. To go back, Ratcliffe. But nevertheless, this tarmac meeting, obviously it generated a lot of attention. And again, the reason that the director said that he did the unprecedented step of acting as an investigator and prosecutor on July the 5th, and, she said, cast a shadow. The day after you sent the Profile in Courage text message was July 2nd, which was the interview of Hillary Clinton, correct? Page. This says the first here, but I take you at Ratcliffe. Yeah, I think, Page, that you have, I know some of them are in UTC and some of them aren't. So UTC refers to Universal Time Code. Basically, that used to be referred to as Zulu time. And then before that, it was Greenwich Mean Time. And UTC is basically the time zones based on the fact that the prime meridian goes through Greenwich, England. And midnight at Greenwich, England is the time that everything is spread off of. The time zones are spread off of. And midnight in the UK is 6 in the morning here at this time of year. If it was not daylight savings time, it would be 5 hours behind. Ahead, excuse me. Wait a minute, did I get that wrong? You do the math. You do the math in your head. It's 6 hour time difference, and the further east you are, the more ahead you are the further east it is, a time zone, the further ahead it is from where you're standing. We'll leave it at that. England is 6 hours ahead right now. We'll leave it at that. Anyway, that's what UTC refers to. Now that I've completely screwed up this entire reading. Let me take you back. Okay. Some of them are in UTC, and some of them aren't. So Ratcliffe. I'll represent to you that it occurred on Saturday, July 2nd of 2016. Page. Okay. Ratcliffe. And I've only got one copy of this, but I've got a document I want to show you, and it's essentially, I think you'd call it an LHM, or letterhead memorandum, which is a summary of, supposed to be a summary of the interview based on the 302s to the people that were in the room. And as you may know, the 302 is a designation of a form numbered, I believe it's called like interview form or subject interview 302. And that's just shorthand for the form that an FBI agent uses to write down his recollection of a interview with a subject. They don't take notes during the interview. They use their recollection to write out the 302 afterwards. That's how I understand it as well. I could be wrong. That's how it was explained to me once. So anytime you see 302s reference, what they're talking about is the agent's notes after the interview took place. Ms. Page, it's a summary of the investigation of all the investigative steps and what we found. Ratcliffe, yeah, but specifically in connection with her interview on July 2nd of 2016. Page, okay. Ratcliffe, yeah, well, you look at, did you play a role in preparing that? Page, because, says Ratcliffe, there were some text messages I thought were you. Page, yeah, so I did not play a role in preparing it. We went through like 52 billion drafts of this thing, like from A to the, like all kinds of changes, because we wanted to be as perfect as we could get it. So I am certain I am on a jillion drafts as well. I am not positive I ever read the entire thing. I started to a couple times, but other things. Ratcliffe, okay, well, I went through it and I read it a couple of times, and I'll represent to you that the word tarmac doesn't appear in there, or Loretta Lynch doesn't appear in there. And Page, that makes sense to me. Ratcliffe, it does? Page, that's not, yes. So I believe you. I have no way to disagree with you. But those were not investigative steps. This was not designed to sort of be every single thing that happened during the course of the Clinton email investigation. This is designed to be an assessment of what the FBI did and what the FBI found. And the tarmac incident doesn't really play a role with respect to those two things. Ratcliffe. So, and that's your opinion. You're entitled to it. I just want to be clear, though. So if a meeting took place 5 days before the interview that everyone in the country is talking about in terms of it being inappropriate, casting a shadow, calling for a quasi-recusal that involves the husband of the subject of the investigation and the boss of 5 people from the Department of Justice that are in the room, you think it's not unusual that someone wouldn't ask a question of the subject of the investigation about that meeting that had occurred 5 days before in public view? Page. Well, so that's not what you asked me. You asked me why it wasn't in here, and so that's sort of my reflection of why that statement isn't in here. With respect to why they didn't ask her, you're asking why the prosecutors didn't ask her questions in the interview? I can't answer that except that, it kind of goes to the point I was making earlier. If we were close to charging her and then suddenly this tarmac meeting happens and now we are not going to charge her, then I agree with you, and then we have a serious controversy on our hands. But I guess I just don't. I fully understand and remember and appreciate the firestorm it created. I completely agree with you on that. But if there was 0.0% evidence the day before the tarmac meeting, and there's 0.0% evidence the day after the tarmac meeting, it doesn't change anything. It's a terrible optic, but it doesn't change the outcome of the investigation. And that is flat out revisionist history. She said before in this, and Comey said before, they had all of her crimes, all of Hillary's crimes, laid out. They knew what had happened. They knew she had set up a private email server. They knew she had had top secret, special access protocol emails on that server. They found more of those on the Wiener laptop later on, but still, before July 5th. They had all this information. They did a crap job. I almost said terrible, but I mean to say crap. They did a crap job interviewing the people directly involved in setting up that server, managing that server, and managing the emails that went back and forth between the Department of State and that server. Emails that should not have been able to have been directly transferred to that server through purely electronic means. The Department of State servers are internal. They're not hooked up to an external network. They're on an internal network. You can't take a server in New York and plug it into the Department of State server in Washington, D.C. It doesn't work that way. They had her on that alone, which was pure and simple enough to be charged under the Espionage Act. Pure and simple. Now she's saying that they had 0% evidence before and 0.0% afterwards. That's a complete and total lie. Complete and total fabrication. Let me start this paragraph again. It just angers me to no end. But I guess I just don't. I fully understand and remember and appreciate the firestorm it created. I completely agree with you on that. But if there was 0.0% evidence the day before the tarmac meeting, and there's 0.0% evidence the day after the tarmac meeting, it doesn't change anything. It's a terrible optic, but it doesn't change the outcome of the investigation. So I was not a part of the decision to ask or not ask. I didn't review the outlines with respect to whether to ask or not ask. I don't know who made the decision whether to ask or not ask. I'm just saying, in my opinion, that it's not weird to me. I'm not sure what you would get out of that question. A lie that you could hold Hillary to? Maybe. Or a truthful answer that would show that the fix was in with Lynch, even though she had quasi-recused herself. And even though it had been already determined months before that Clinton wouldn't be charged. But still, it would have been, I tell you why they didn't ask, because it would have been inconvenient. An Inconvenient Truth, I believe is the name of a movie. I think it's based on a book. I'm not sure. Don't quote me on that. But yeah, it would have been an inconvenient truth if Hillary had answered that question. Then what would they have done? They would really had to have covered up then. Ratcliffe. Well, I guess, Page, because there still wasn't sufficient evidence to charge her. Bull. Ratcliffe. What you'd get if the stated premise that everyone seems to have given is that she's not going to be charged unless she lies in her interview. She can't lie if she isn't asked the questions. Thank you very much, Mr. Radcliffe. But she wasn't at this meeting. Her husband was. Ratcliffe. Page, right? So what is Ratcliffe? I guess you could confirm that if you asked her, just like you could confirm what they talked about and whether or not there was any number of discussions. Anyway, you're entitled to your opinion. I just wanted to ask you about it because I'd seen something in these text messages that indicate that you were involved in this. And do you recall some text messages with Agent Strzok about some of the 302s being inflammatory and not letting Congress have those? Ooh, this is new to me. Page, yes. Ratcliffe. Okay, what do you recall about that? Page. So that was when we started our production of the materials that Congress had requested. So it's not so much, and ultimately they were all turned over anyway. There were emails there were 302s, which didn't ultimately speak to any of the evidence that we found. They were inflammatory. They were certainly, Ratcliffe, what do you recall about them? How were they inflammatory? Because I don't know that they have been turned over. Page. So one is the quid pro quo. I mean, that that's gone, sort of, to the end of the earth, that Brian, what was his last name? Macaulay, maybe? So this was the claim. Sorry. I haven't thought about this in a while, so I don't want to get this wrong. In other words, give me a moment to come up with a lie. So there was the claim that very early in the Clinton, shortly after opening the investigation, before that. Sorry, let me think about this for a second. When the State Department was first, I think, complying with either their FOIA or something, and had first determined that there may be classified information among the emails which had been collected, there was an allegation that Patrick Kennedy, who was then the Undersecretary for Management, I think, at the State Department, had reached out to Brian Macaulay, I think that's his last name, but I could be getting it wrong, who was an executive in our International Operations Division, and had essentially, the allegation was that if Macaulay could get the classification of this particular document changed, that the FBI could get the legat spots that they wanted at certain embassies or something like that. I might be getting some of this wrong. I remember this now. There wasn't the quo, unfortunately. The FBI, I believe Comey actually, dangled this in front of Department of State that said, hey, we'll help you bury these emails to keep Clinton out of the fire if you guys will open up more spots for FBI personnel at different embassies. Because some embassies can be seen as mainly a vacation spot. And the FBI agents have a lot of time on their hands after work hours. Some of them aren't, of course. Some of them are in rather dangerous areas. But I doubt the FBI would want more positions in those particular embassy cities. Speculation on my part. Rank speculation. And yes, Uncle Bobbity, physical access is a conspiracy fact. Absolutely. So anyway, Page continues. And so that had been investigated. I think both individuals had been interviewed by the FBI. The classification of the document never changed. The legat spots were never granted, and so it was sort of a wash. So Trump can say to one of his advisors, I want to fire Mueller. And the advisor says, not a good idea, Mr. President. And Trump says, I agree. I won't do that. That leaks to the press, even if it really happened. And there's a firestorm. An absolute crap storm about that Trump wanted to fire Mueller. and that he's inserting himself into the legal process, and that he's obstructing justice. Not thinking about firing someone who he has every constitutional right to fire, but that he's obstructing justice. But the FBI tries to enter into a quid quo pro with the State Department about declassifying a document in order to let Hillary off the hook, and in return, more FBI agents get spots in plum embassy positions? Nothing said. No one talked about it. It's almost as if there is some kind of a standard that's one-sided, a double standard. Maybe I'm wrong. So the point was, page continuing, the point was we were trying to prioritize the 302s and the documents which actually went to the underlying decision not to prosecute. Those were not those. And so in terms of having limited resources and trying to prioritize the things which would be most salient to Congress's review of our investigation, the Macaulay stuff, there was something else, I can't remember now what it is, but sort of sideshow things that didn't actually affect what the outcome was or what the evidence was in the investigation were sort of deprioritized. So, I mean, that's all meant to reflect ultimately. It's obviously a text message, so it doesn't have all that context and background, but that's what that's a reflection of. In other words, they were trying to hide evidence of colluding, criminally conspiring with the State Department because they didn't think they would have to turn it over because it didn't have to do anything with the Clinton investigation, even though the fact that they're saying she had a confidential document on her private server, that they had evidence of that, that right there is evidence of her breaking the law. But that didn't matter. Okay, now we're up to 3:11 p.m. that day. Radcliffe. Okay, I want to go back to the Comey memos that we were talking about. And you were relating sort of the process that you and Andy McCabe and others apparently would have a conversation with Director Comey about the material and what became his memos as a readout. Did I miss anyone besides you and Andy McCabe? Page. It's a very small number. Radcliffe. Okay, who else can you think of? Page. Hey, Warkettle. We're reading the Lisa Page testimony that was leaked just the other night. Very nice to see you too, sir. It has been a long time, and I apologize. That's completely my fault. I haven't been by the Discord server for months, and I have no real definitive excuse other than that I've been sick for the last few weeks, but that doesn't make up for the fact I wasn't there basically at all the last half of last year. I want to get on and talk to you because I want to see how you're doing. Your channel was exploding the last time I looked, and I didn't have a chance to really congratulate you on that. I hope it's still doing well, and we definitely got to get together. Give me a couple weeks to put my schedule back in order. I'm just getting well again, and I've got a lot of catching up to do on things. I haven't shot in basically 4 months, for instance. But we'll get together and we'll really hash some things out. It's great to see you. Thanks for stopping by. I'm glad to hear that. Busy's good. Busy's always better than not. Good for you. Okay, so back to Ratcliffe. Okay, who else can you think of? Page. I think the director's testimony was Jim Rabicki, and this is from memory, so it's in some hearing transcript somewhere. Jim Rabicki, Mr. McCabe, Mr. Gaddis, maybe Mr. Bowditch, and myself. There may have been one or two other times in which one or two other people may have been aware of a particular hearing a readout of a particular memo. I'm sorry, let me correct one thing. The one exception to the list I just provided was that Mr. Comey did brief his senior Crossfire Hurricane team of the meeting in early January when he's there with Clapper and Brennan and the rest of the Admiral Rogers and the head of the leaders of the intelligence community, briefing him on the intelligence community's assessment of the Russian interference and the Russia Active Measures report. Of course, there were no Russia active measures when Obama was in office during the last half of 2016 when it was all going down. But, you know, that's a minor point. The memo that he, talking Page still, the memo that he drafted following that meeting, in which he also, is that public? Let me stop there. The memo that he drafted, he did brief the sort of senior crossfire team of the events. We had talked about it in advance of that meeting, and he gave a readout of, you know, a debrief following that meeting. So that's the only exception in terms of the Comey memos that had a more expanded personnel list, to my knowledge. Mr. Ratcliffe, okay, and so was the discussion before you had talked about, and you said when we talk about concerns that the director had, were those concerns about the topics that the president was talking about, or were they concerns about the president? Page, I don't know what you're talking about. I'm sorry. What do you mean, what concerns I had? Ratcliffe, giving the answer, you said he would bring us together to talk about, from his meetings with the president, concerns that came about. And I'm wondering, were there concerns about topics that the president was talking about, or was the concern the president? Page, well, I only recall I think I was only present for one, other than the January meeting about the ICA. I think I was only present for one meeting in which he had described what had just transpired. I don't remember which one that was of the memos that I've read and was privy to. I just don't remember which particular one I was present for. I just remember being present for one of them. You're in the room with the director of the FBI. He has let you see all of the memos that he wrote about his contacts with Trump, private contacts. He's let you read them, and you still can't remember in which meeting you were in the one time that he talked about it specifically, with you present? I find that hard to believe. I could be wrong. She hasn't been all that truthful through this whole thing, so I have the right to disregard her truthfulness, but maybe I'm wrong. Mr. Ratcliffe, okay, well, do you remember I asked you before about an obstruction of justice as a topic, and you gave an answer, and then you came back and said, I need to take my answer back. Page, that answer back, yeah. Ratcliffe, but generally talked about certain matters, I guess. Let me ask you this. I asked you the other day about a text message that Peter Strzok sent you the day that Jim Comey got fired, where he said, and we need to open the case we've been waiting on now while Andy is acting. And you explained it didn't have anything to do with when Andy was acting, but the case we were waiting on. Is that the same information that's reflected in some of the Comey memos? 18 U.S.C. 924C? And then there's an at after that. I have no idea what that's supposed to mean. Excuse me just a moment. I have to say something to my technical director. All right, taken care of. Okay, discussion off the record. Page, Mr. Ratcliffe, I'm sure this is going to be an unsatisfying answer, but I have reviewed all the Comey memos. As I said, I have read most of them in real time at the time that they were written. I don't have any basis to disagree with the claims made in the Comey memos, but with respect to what steps we may or may not have taken, based on either on those claims or following the director's firing, on advice of FBI counsel, I can't answer that at this time. Ratcliffe, okay, your inability to answer tells me a lot. And what it tells me is inconsistent. And what I'm trying to get at is it is inconsistent with what Jim Comey has admitted that he told the president. I think that he wasn't under investigation during that time frame. Maybe, Page, that is not inconsistent, sir. Ratcliffe, okay, so he wasn't under investigation, but that doesn't mean there was a discussion going on about potential crimes involving the FBI director's senior leadership team. That's what you're telling us? Page, I am not telling you that, but the statement, if taken as a hypothetical, somebody could not be under investigation, but there still could be discussion about potential criminal activity, and that is totally consistent with FBI policies and would not be unusual with respect to any investigation. Mr. Ratcliffe, except the unusual part about memorializing it in memos that hadn't been done with any other presidents, right? I'm sorry, I inserted the word any there. In memos that hadn't been done with other presidents, right? Page, I don't know what you're asking me. I'm sorry. How do you... What? Meadows, well, let me follow up, if you don't mind. Are you aware of any other time that Director Comey memorialized conversations with President Obama? Page, I think he has testified that he did not do that. That's correct. Meadows, okay. And so you did not find it unique that he would be memorializing these conversations, and they weren't in totality of all the conversations you had, but he memorialized these particular conversations. Did you not find that unique? Page, I think that he did memorialize all his conversations with Meadows, President-elect, Page, President-elect or President Trump. I think that's been his testimony. I wouldn't have known that he did or didn't do it beforehand, to be honest with you. So I don't know that I can answer your question. Ratcliffe, did Director Comey have any conversations with you about the purpose behind him creating these memos? Page, no. Ratcliffe, okay. Did Andy McCabe create any memos? Page, yes. Ratcliffe, tell us about those. Page, I can't do that, sir. Ratcliffe, okay, I'm going to try and respect as much of this as I can, but given the fact that you've acknowledged that there were memos, or at least a memo, I want to find out as much as I can about the timing and circumstances of it, even if you won't disclose the content of it. So first of all, let me ask you, are you aware of the content of the memo or memos? Page, I am. Ratcliffe, were you involved in the preparation of the memo or memos? Page, I reviewed some of them, probably not all, but some of them, mostly for like spelling and typographical things before he finalized them. Ratcliffe, okay, you say them, so there were multiple memos. Do you know approximately how many memos? You gotta love Ratcliffe and Meadows. They do a great job. They really do. Page, let's be more specific about memos with whom, if we could. Ratcliffe, memos with respect to President Trump. Page, just meetings with President Trump? Ratcliffe, just what? Page, just meetings with President Trump? Ratcliffe, meetings, conversations, interactions, communications. Page, with the President? Ratcliffe, with President Trump. Page, there's a very small number. I'm not certain, but one or two. I'm not certain. Okay, first she says memos, and now it's one or two. Ratcliffe, and can you tell me anything about the timing of those memos, when they were created and the circumstances under which they were created, without getting into the content? Page, with respect to those one or two, to the best of my recollection, he would have created them shortly in time following whatever interaction he may have had. Ratcliffe, and was it his interaction necessarily, or could it have been memos about, I'm trying to find out, again, the timing of this. Is this sort of related to the firing of Jim Comey or other events? Page, I'm sorry, ask me that question again. Please let me think of a lie. That was editorializing. I apologize. Ratcliffe, I'm just trying to determine the context of now what I'm going to refer to as the McCabe memos and when they were created and what the circumstances of the McCabe memos were. So, can you give me when was the first McCabe memo created? If you can give me the general time frame and the circumstances under which it was created. Page, I could not guess at a date. I do not think that the deputy director had any interactions with the President of the United States until after he became the acting director. Ratcliffe, okay. Page, but I am speculating about that as I sit here today. Ratcliffe, okay, you're not certain about that. Do you know whether or not there were any McCabe memos during the Obama administration? Page, not to my knowledge. I'm sorry. Memorializing interaction with President Obama? Ratcliffe, yes. Page, no, not to my knowledge. Excuse me just a second. I have to mute myself briefly. Okay. Ratcliffe, okay, what's your understanding of why Deputy Director or Acting Director McCabe generated a memo or memos memorializing his interactions with President Trump? Page, I'm not really crazy about speaking for them. I would say in general that an FBI agent memorializes the substance of a conversation when he thinks there is a reason to memorialize it, whether it is the substance, whether it is the circumstances of the meeting, whether it is the nature of the interaction. We write something down when it seems worth writing down. How convenient. Ratcliffe, were the McCabe memos ever disclosed outside the FBI to your knowledge? Page, not outside the department, to my knowledge. Ratcliffe, would the special counsel have access to the McCabe memos? Page, yes. Ratcliffe, would the McCabe memos be relevant to the matters that the special counsel is investigating? Page, yes. Ratcliffe, you mentioned that there were other memos that I'm not sure I understood. The ones that we're talking about related to his interactions with the president, but you intimated that there were other McCabe memos that were responsive to my first overarching question. Can you tell me what those memos relate to? How would you characterize those? Page, Mr. McCabe memorialized certain interactions with either White House personnel or others when there was something noteworthy to memorialize, sir. Ratcliffe, did either Deputy Director McCabe or Acting Director McCabe, whatever capacity, did he discuss the memos to your knowledge with Jim Comey? Page, certainly the ones that were written before the director was fired, I would expect so. He would not have discussed any memos that he drafted after the director was fired because the director was no longer a government employee. Ratcliffe, based on public reports, Acting Director McCabe interviewed with President Trump for the position of Director of the FBI on or about May 18th of 2017. Do you know if Acting Director McCabe discussed the McCabe memos or the Comey memos or disclosed the existence of either to President Trump in that interview? Page, I don't know. Ratcliffe, did you have a conversation with Acting Director McCabe about his interview with the president? Page, I did. Ratcliffe, his interview for the position of FBI Director? Page, yes. Ratcliffe, what generally did he relate to you about the interview that you may recall? Page, I'm sorry, sir. I'm not going into the details of those conversations at this time. Ratcliffe, for what stated reason? You can't just put up a wall in front of Ratcliffe. He's going to want to know why. Page, because I have no idea what among the memos that McCabe drafted is of investigative utility or not to the special counsel, and so because I have no knowledge of that, I can't start parsing some parts of the content and versus others. Baker, when McCabe was just regular deputy director, did he ever keep any memos from conversations or interactions he had with Director Comey? Page, he did not keep memos, but he obviously took notes, during the course of his duties. Baker, okay. Meadows, Lisa, may I do a follow-up from previously? When we talked about the dossier's existence came into your knowledge in mid-September, I think it's been reported, but also during testimony, that there was a number of different versions of different memos, I guess, that the FBI became aware of. Is that correct? Page, not memos, but of the reports that are called the dossier. Meadows, yeah. Page, Meadows, yeah, I'm not following up on this. I'm sorry, I'm not following up on his. Page, okay. But as we now know, is the dossier because it had a number of different reports there. Page, my understanding is that if there are, I'm going to make this up, if there are 20 reports that the FBI received from Christopher Steele, I've completely made that number up. Meadows, right. Page, I'm just using it for example's sake. If there are 20 reports that the FBI received from Christopher Steele at various times and from various individuals, people, other government employees, wherever, the FBI has received certain subsets of that 20. So, from one person, we might have received 11. From another person, we might have received 14. I'm just doing this for example's sake. But yes, it is my understanding that the FBI has received from various sources, not confidential human sources, but from various places, Meadows, right. Page, varied subsets of the quote-unquote dossier. Meadows. So when that happened, and we started to look at that, and obviously you've got mid-September through the third week in October, when a FISA application is actually issued on Carter Page. Oh, I thought the first FISA was issued. Oh, I'm sorry. Yes. They initially went for the FISA in mid-September, and then they applied again when that one got kicked out, and it was finally turned on the third week of October. Okay. Sorry, I got mixed up by the syntax there. In October, when a FISA application is actually issued on Carter Page, did you receive multiple sources before the mid-September, or were the multiple sources after the original FISA application? Page, I think after. Well, that's a lie. Meadows, okay. So did you communicate that, or was that outlined in the follow-up FISA applications that you might have gotten additional? Page, I'm not sure. That's my point. I'm not sure any were additional. Meadows, right. But as a subset, they were different. So, I mean, here is Page. No, that's Meadows. So what you're saying is they were all consistent. It just was Page, duplicative. Right. So, Meadows, let's say there were 16 different items. You might have gotten 11 from this source and 10 from this, but they were all consistent is what you're saying. Page, that's my recollection. Yes. Meadows, all right. Page. So it's not as though if we had 20 and Joe Smith provided us with 11, all 11 were within the 20 we had. It's not as though one of them was new to us out of the original 20. Provided us, all were within. I think I read that wrong. If we had 20 and Joe Smith provided us with 11, all 11 were within the 20 we had. It's not as though one of them was new to us out of the original 20. That's my Meadows, right. Page, I guess I should hedge this, though, because I'm not looking at any of these. That's my understanding based on what had been briefed to Director Comey or otherwise. I never looked at any of the non-official sources. Meadows, right. Page, of the dossier. We got the set of reports that we got from Christopher Steele, our confidential human source. That was sort of the authoritative set that we cared about. To the extent we got chunks or subsets from other people, we collected them, but Meadows, at what point did you start to get concerned that there may be some potential credibility issues as it relates to who may have paid for the work? Did you ever? Page, me, Mr. Meadows. I mean, because we know that on January 10th of 2017, they were still, according to Peter Strzok's email to you and others, that they were unverified still at that particular point. Page, so there's a lot. Meadows, January 10th. Page, there's a lot packed in there, though. So to your first question, when did I get concerned? I'm not sure that I ever actually had a concern. And the reason is that with respect to certainly the first FISA, I think we had an understanding that Steele had first been engaged by a Republican opposition, but I'm not going to be able to describe it better, and I hope I'm not, Meadows, somebody opposite of Trump. Page, exactly, by a Republican who was seeking opposition research. And then, after that person had dropped out, I didn't know who. You didn't know who. But after that sort had fallen away, that the engagement continued for the Democrats. So that was sort of a wash as far as I'm concerned. There wasn't, in my view, a political motive that affected the Meadows. No, the political narrative is that they were all against Donald Trump. That would be the consistent theme there. Page, right. Meadows. Whether it was for Marco Rubio or Ted Cruz, they were all consistently against Donald Trump. Page, that's right. But because of the person that Christopher Steele was, and both his, Meadows, because he was credible from before when you worked with him. Page, exactly. And this was not a source of consternation in my view. Meadows. So let me drill down. Oh, I'm looking forward to this. And specifically, Mike Horton and media contacts, potential media contacts, at what point did that become a concern as it relates to Christopher Steele and some of the communication that was not just a couple? It seemed to be widespread. Page, right. So we were very concerned about the existence and the content of Steele's reporting leaking. We were very concerned about Meadows. In fact, Did you not verify that he had leaked? I mean, today, if you were to... Page, hold on, I'm sorry. 1 second. Meadows, go ahead, sorry. Page, no. At some point, December-ish, I think. Maybe earlier than that, maybe November. Mike Cortan, the head of our public affairs office, does start to inform the team that there are more outlets asking him about this. Do you have it? What is it? Have you heard of this? Because of the existence of these reports, is starting to sort of circulate in Washington circles. And I remember the team discussing, as a collective sort, of saying, like, how our singular focus was to not confirm that we had them because then we knew that the press couldn't necessarily report on the substance of the allegations because they were so inflammatory. Meadows, right. Page, but if they wanted to report in a way that would be less inflammatory, they could simply say, the FBI has reports that say blah-de-blah-de-blah. So our single focus was to make sure they could not do that. And with some regularity, Corton would inform us that this news outlet or that news outlet had asked him, do you have these? Do you know about them? And we just had a resolute no comment because we did not want to allow the opportunity that we did have these to even allow that to be the news story. Until Comey, under the direction, I think it was under the direction of Brennan or Clapper. I can't remember which of those evil bastards had him do it, but he had Comey instruct Trump about the piss dossier part of the Steele effluvia, and then they could go back and say, well, I briefed the president on this, so now it's a matter of public record. Pure evil, all the way down the line, just pure evil. Meadows. So it was Mike Corten's acknowledgement that this potentially could have been happening with Christopher Steele. Was that part of the decision to not reimburse Steele as has been reported, or pay him for part of the work as a confidential human source? Page, I don't know what you're talking about. I'm sorry. Mike, so Christopher Steele was never... He came to us and gave us this information. We didn't. Meadows. So there was never an indication to reimburse him for his expenses or anything else? No. We reimbursed him for his... Meadows, pay him for his travel time? Page, his travel expenses. Meadows, pay him for his time? Page, not to my knowledge. Meadows, I can see my colleague from Texas getting anxious, so I'm going to yield back. Page, I was going to say one other thing. One of the other things you said, sort of unverified, salacious. And so that's true, and I can't get into sort of the substance of what we did, but immediately, I mean, as soon as we received the reporting from Steele in mid-September, you were getting it in July, sweetie. Bruce Orr was pushing it in July. We set about trying to prove or disprove every single factual statement in the dossier. And what success did you have with that? And we had line-level analysts who are super experts on Russia try to pick apart each statement and either try to prove its veracity or prove its inaccuracy. And to the best of my knowledge, we were never able to disprove any statement in it. So we were never able to say there's a claim about X and that is untrue. Correct me, this sounds to me like proving a negative, which you can't do logically, but maybe I'm misreading it and not being charitable to what Ms. Page is saying. So again, in the comments at this time hack right here, which is an hour 10, 55, somewhere in there, time hack that and let me know if I'm wrong about this being described as trying to prove a negative or not. Because I read it as that, and that really raises my hackles that she would try to use this as a justification for the dossier. To continue, Page. There are some statements for which we have never been able to confirm or deny its veracity, but there are no statements contained in the, at least at the last time that the review is done, which is now many months ago, that we were able to demonstrate or show were demonstrably false. So you couldn't prove that Michael Cohen was never in Prague, even though you had easy access to his passport and visa stamps. Fine. Ratcliffe, Ms. Page, are you talking about the Woods file? Page, no, the Woods file is a document that accompanies a FISA, which provides the basis for each statement contained therein. Right, Ratcliffe says. I've seen it. Page, okay, Ratcliffe, but Page, I'm not talking about the Woods file. I'm talking about a separate effort that was undertaken in order to try to verify for investigative purposes, not for purposes of the FISA, but a separate effort undertaken to try and validate the allegations contained within the Steele reporting. So you had two sets of people trying to validate the Steele reporting, one in order to allow it for FISA use and one to give it a general overview. Why would you waste duplicate resources on such an effort? Is the FBI that overladen with analysts that you can have two teams doing the same thing at the same time, seeking the same results? Seems kind of funny. Ratcliffe, okay, so what was the name? Maybe I missed it. What was the name of that document? Page, there's no name. Ratcliffe, if I were trying to locate that or ask for it to be produced, what would I be asking for? Page, I mean, the efforts to validate the Steele reporting, I don't know. It's not like a document. I mean, it is not a Meadows. I guess what he's saying is we have not seen these documents yet. We've made multiple requests. So I guess how can you help us home in on where those requests may or may not be? Ratcliffe, and the reason I mentioned the Woods file is because I have seen the Woods file because I've wanted, Page, the Woods file is different. Ratcliffe, and I understand that. But I thought maybe you were talking about it without naming it. So if there's another document out there that attempts to do something similar, it sounds like, Page, no, I don't. It is not that similar. Every single FISA that goes to the FISA court has a Woods file. Excuse me for a second. Clear my throat. That's better. Back up just a sec. No, I don't. It's not that similar. Every single FISA that goes to the FISA court has a Woods file. Ratcliffe, right. Page, no matter the topic, no matter the subject, no matter the threat. The Woods file is part of the FISA process, which is designed to demonstrate that we have done due diligence with respect to the facts supporting the FISA application. This is a sort of separate effort that investigative team undertook. Ratcliffe, okay, Ms. Page, I've had a chance to ask you questions over the last Friday and again today. I know I've asked you some tough questions, but I want to get on the record. Have I been discourteous to you at all? Page, no, sir. Ratcliffe, have I given you the full opportunity to answer or explain your answers? Page, yes, sir. Ratcliffe, and have I generally been fair in my questioning? Page, yes. Ratcliffe, believe it or not, I'm asking that. Believe it or not, some folks might misrepresent how we conduct ourselves in here, and I want to get that on the record. So, I thank you for your time. Meadows, and the gentleman from Boston has a couple of questions for me, and you'll tell by his accent very quickly. Mr. Brebbia. Hi, I'm Sean Brebbia, Oversight and Government Reform Majority. Sean? Brebbia. B-R-E-B-B-I-A. Now, questioning by Mr. Brebbia. I show you an email between you and Peter Strzok from October 18, 2016. Answer. I just want to take a second to start from the beginning and look at it. Brebbia. Sure, please do. Page. Okay. Just beginning very basically, can you tell us a little bit about what's being discussed here? The subject is redacted. Page. Am I allowed to? I'm sorry, 1 second, please. Ms. Bessie, may we confer? Mr. Brebbia, sure. Discussion off the record. Ms. Page. So I can't. I believe that I can answer the question. I don't believe I can answer the question in an unclassified setting. Brebbia. Okay. Summers. But could you answer the question in a classified setting? Page. Yes. Brebbia. And FBI. By Mr. Brebbia. Okay. Couple more. In this email, there's mention of they editing a document. Subject of the email is redacted. The document that's being discussed, did the redacted have any involvement with preparing that document? Answer, there's no way I can answer that. I can't answer that in this. I'm sorry. Question, how about anyone at the White House? Anyone at the White House have involvement in drafting that document? Answer, I can say generally, I'm not aware of the White House ever. In my personal knowledge, I've never been part of any FISA in which the White House has been involved. Question, and how about knowledge? Is there at the White House, anyone in the White House have knowledge of that document? Answer, not to my knowledge. Question, it probably makes more sense to take this up in classified setting. Answer, I think so, sir. Mr. Parmenter, I have to say this just as an aside. Whenever I see the word Parmenter, I think of Captain Parmenter, I believe that's how his name was pronounced, from F Troop, that classic, really bad Cavalry and Indians series that was out in the early 60s with Ken. Larry Storch was one of the players, and the guy from Mayberry RFD, he was the captain. It had its moments. Okay, Kettle, have a great time. I know it's late for you. This will be up later on, so you can peruse it at your leisure. The time hack for you right now would be 1 hour and 18 minutes, in case you want to skip to that part. And it's great having you here. Take care. So Captain Parmenter, I'm kidding. Could I ask a couple of follow-up questions to some of the things you talked about with Mr. Ratcliffe? You referred to a separate document that was not the Woods file to validate allegations in the Steele reporting. I'm just kind of curious as to the time frame. When did that sort of separate effort begin to corroborate the Steele reporting, and when did it end? Page, it began immediately upon receiving the Steele reporting, and I do not know when it ended. By Mr. Baker. And what steps were taken to validate or refute any of the points made in the document? I can't go into more detail about the specific efforts that were taken, other than that Herculean efforts were taken to try to prove and or disprove or corroborate in any way the statements contained in the Steele reporting. Question. Okay, let's take the Steele reporting out of it. If you were trying to validate points made in information given from another source, would it be fair to say one of the techniques to validate or disprove would be to task other sources? Answer, redacted. Long answer, redacted. Question. So you would do everything and anything that's authorized, but that could include tasking other human sources too? Answer, well, yes, I guess it could, but think about really what you're saying. If I have a document that says on January 25th of 2013, Joe Smith and Sally Jones were at a restaurant, redacted, that's a historical event, redacted. I can't begin to understand why that's redacted. I'm sure there's a reason for it, but how you could have a hypothetical statement starting off with Joe Smith and Sally Jones were at a restaurant, and then it's redacted. Wow. Question, but if you have a source that owned the restaurant, I mean, you could have a source that, answer, if you redacted, and then you would likely get whatever answer then, certainly. But more likely, I mean, so maybe you would redacted, period. I mean, I'm making this up, obviously, but the more expeditious and likely investigative steps would be to look at what is redacted. Question, okay, answer, and that would at least make that statement more likely to be true or less likely to be true, depending on what you find. Okay, thank you. Questions by Mr. Breitenbach. You had indicated on Friday that there was an investigator who had been brought over to the special counsel's office prior to Mr. Strzok being employed, but that person was not a good fit? That's correct. Who was that person? I think his name was John Brown. Did he break into the armory at Harper's Ferry? And why do you think that special counsel deemed him Mr. John Brown, you said? I think that's his name, yeah. Why do you think the special counsel deemed him not to be a good fit? You would have to ask the special counsel. So you're not aware of why he might have been removed. I'm not going to speculate. From the team. No. Why did you leave the special counsel's office? Answer. I talked about this at length on Friday. When Mr. Mueller first asked me to join, I was quite hesitant to do so. It had been an incredibly intense 2 years, and I have very young children at home, and I wanted to be a better parent to them, including stopping sleeping around with Strzok. And so I originally demurred, and Mr. McCabe encouraged me to go and help out. And so as a sort of compromise position, that was rude. I apologize. That was really rude. I shouldn't have said that. And so as sort of a compromise position, I talked with Mr. Mueller about coming over for 45 days to sort of help them stand up their effort, and that we would sort of reassess at the end of those 45 days. And ultimately, I know what a Bob Mueller operation looks like, and I know the intensity and the rigor and the incredibly hard work that is required. And I was just ready to sort of make a change in my personal life, and so I left after the 45 days and returned to the FBI. Question. Okay. And also in your testimony on Friday, you had made some statement indicating that we had access to all of your emails, texts, and communications. Answer. I mean, this is my presumption. There's not a whole lot of secrets out there left on me. Question. Are you aware whether there was any preservation order ever issued with respect to any of your communications? Answer. Preservation by whom and for what? Question. That's what I'm asking. Maybe from special counsel's office, the FBI, by... Answer. I mean the FBI, to the best of my knowledge, preserves everything. And I'm certain there have been preservation orders that the FBI has sort of announced, but I'm not even there anymore. So I don't have access to any of the stuff before you in the first place. Question. We understand you communicated through other devices, other accounts, including iMessage and Gmail. Has there been any effort to access any of those communications? Answer. Well, I don't have any iMessages. We communicated using our personal devices for personal purposes. We very infrequently use those devices for work purposes. And, question, I'm sorry, I missed that. Answer. We very infrequently used our personal devices for work purposes. Question. Have you turned over those messages that were work-related? Answer. There are no work-related messages in my personal accounts. Question. But you indicated you infrequently, meaning at some point you did communicate regarding work-related purposes over personal devices. I am sure that I have. I never retained those. And unless they were a record requiring, sending it back through the FBI system, there's no need to retain those. Question. And neither the FBI nor the special counsel has ever attempted or requested your communications over personal devices or personal accounts. Answer. One moment, please. Discussion off the record. Page. So there is. My understanding is that there is some FOIA litigation, either at the department or the FBI, for which work-related material on my personal accounts have been requested to be preserved, but I do not have any such material to preserve. And again, I know you're all old hands at this, but just in case you weren't aware, FOIA, F-O-I-A, stands for Freedom of Information Act, where you petition the government agency to turn over sets of communications between certain parties that are then released to you, sometimes in full form, sometimes in slightly redacted, sometimes in heavily redacted forms for you to use for perhaps, say, you have some upcoming litigation that you want to prepare for, and you want government records pertaining to that, or you want government records about something going on in your community, and you want to know how the feds have been handling that kind of process previously to yours, and if that's changed in the meantime, and if so, you want to ask why. Things like that. That's what FOIA is for. Now, if you really want to see FOIA turned up to 11, watch Judicial Watch. Judicial Watch, 2 words, on YouTube. Tom Fitton is the director of Judicial Watch. These people do incredible work. There would be no Hillary Clinton email investigation, either former or perhaps future, without Judicial Watch. I'll tell you that. No one knew about that server until the Judicial Watch came along. By Mr. Breitenbach. You indicated previously that the importance that you placed on the Russia investigation over the Clinton email investigation in terms of the effect you believed it might have on national security. Are you aware whether there was any similar targeting of the Hillary Clinton campaign by any foreign intelligence service? Answer, no, not that I'm aware. And just to be clear about your question, that answer was given with respect to once we were in October and we had the sort of ongoing Russia investigation and we had the potential additional emails that may have existed on the Wiener laptop. So I just want to make sure we're talking about, it's not as though, other than in that one particular month, the two investigations never overlapped, such that we had to do a weighing or balancing of the two investigations. Question. Serving as counsel to Mr. McCabe, the number 2 at the FBI, is that the kind of information you might learn of with respect to whether another? Answer. If there had been a serious attempt by a foreign power by a threatening foreign power to work with members of the Clinton campaign, I would have expected to know about it. Yes. Question. Okay, thank you. Questions by Mr. Summers. You mentioned the name John Brown a few minutes ago. Can you just clarify where he is, what his job is? Answer. I have no idea what his job is right now. No, was at the time. Sorry. Answer. So, when the special counsel first stood up and they were looking to staff that effort, they, the FBI, I think, originally wanted to put somebody other than Pete on it so that Pete could kind of go back to his day job, and I think I described in some depth on Friday. And so the person they originally sought to fill the kind of lead FBI role in the special counsel was an individual named John Brown. National Security Division? Counterintelligence? Answer, I think CyberSac. Mr. Summers, I think we're out of time for this round. Okay, they come back into session at 4:07 p.m. Ms. Kim, we're back on the record. It is 4:07. Questions by Ms. Kim. Ms. Page, the email that you discovered with the majority about the redacted has been used as an exhibit for a news article that came out on July 6, 2018 from The Hill entitled Memos Detail FBI's Hurry the F Up to Probe Trump Campaign. Are you familiar with that article? Answer. I'm sorry, can you step just a little bit further from the mic? It's a little bit of, yeah. Does this help? Yeah, sorry. So say that all over again, please. Well, you know you're leading the questioning off to a good start when you're swallowing the microphone so badly the witness can't understand what you're saying. I wonder how hard it was to transcribe that particular exchange. Question, yes, the redacted email that you reviewed with the majority was used in an article from The Hill by opinion contributor John Solomon rocks, about how the FBI allegedly kept hurry the F up pressure on the Trump campaign probe. Are you familiar with that article? I am familiar with that article, yes. Question. The thesis from that article, third paragraph of that article I'll read to you, is, the question that lingers unanswered is, did those sentiments, meaning anti-Trump sentiments, affect official actions? Answer, right. Question. So insofar as you can tell us in an unclassified setting, did the redacted process reflect any political biases or other improper motives? Answer. No. As I think I discussed earlier, I probably shouldn't have discussed it earlier in that setting. Okay, never mind. No, there were no political interest or bias which affected the Carter Page FISA. That's going to come out very, very quickly and clearly to be a complete and total lie. Question. Did it reflect any undue haste on the part of the FBI in an attempt to try to stop Donald Trump from becoming elected president? Answer. No, not at all. Question by Ms. Harahuran. I'm just going to call her Mrs. H. Also, a part of the article is they cite Peter Strzok's testimony from when he met with us in the transcribed interview, where he said, quote, in response to Mr. Gowdy's question of whether he was involved in the preparation of the affidavit in support of that FISA, he said, quote, I can tell you that I was aware of the FISA application, but I did not participate in its preparation. And then when asked again, he wrote, excuse me, he said, I did not provide information. I did speak with people who were preparing it. So, referring back to the emails that the majority showed you, was that Peter Strzok acting in his capacity as a supervisor for those responsible for the FISA application? Answer, that's correct. So, speaking more generally, A person in a DAD role does not have any role in the FISA process. It's a very sort of regimented process that goes back and forth from the department to the FBI. At no time does a DAD need to approve it, or read it, or write it, or provide intelligence toward it. And I think I said earlier, but just to be sure, it's my understanding that DAD stands for Deputy Acting Director. To the extent Pete was involved, it was because he was. To the extent Pete was knowledgeable that it was happening, it's because he was in charge of the Crossfire investigation. That's the Crossfire Hurricane Trump collusion investigation. But that's consistent with my understanding and recollection. He did not have a role in the drafting or the sort of approval of the FISA. Question. So just to be clear, he was not one of the individuals involved in sort of the preparation of the factual. Answer, that's correct. Question, okay. And then to the best of your knowledge, then was his testimony accurate? Answer, that's correct, yes. Question, thank you. Mr. Cohen. Ms. Page, I'm sorry, I've missed your testimony on Friday and this morning, so there might be things that are repetitious. I believe I'm correct that you've said that even if people had political perspectives, and some people were anti-Hillary, and some people thought Bernie was beyond the burn, etc., that none of these biases affected any of the actions of Mr. Strzok or of you or of anybody else within the Mueller Special Counsel investigation. And hello, Jason, sir, and thank you, I shall. By the way, just to, with that stop, you'll notice none of these congressmen, because this is a House committee, none of the congressmen in these descriptions here, you don't get their political party. It doesn't say Democrat or Independent or Conservative. I mean, Republican, excuse me. It doesn't say that, but you can tell by the question who they are pretty quickly. So if you want to determine if it's a Democrat asking the question, just look and see if it's a general question about how people reacted regarding their biases. You know, were you ever biased against Trump just because you didn't like him? Were other people ever biased against Hillary? Things like that. Just very general, easygoing questions that are very easy to answer, even if untruthfully, because no one can determine what you were really thinking in your head. And the IG report did not say that anything that Page did or Strzok did was verifiably a result of their bias against Trump or their bias for Hillary. The IG report totally cleared them of that. So they can go ahead in these further investigations, these further question series with the House and with the Senate, and they've got a clean bill of health. They can say no, there was no reaction whatsoever to how I felt about him. Everything I did was completely cleared away from that. They've got an open book. And those are the questions that the Democrats ask. The Republicans ask, okay, who knew this when? What was Comey doing when he was writing these memos and he never memorialized his conversations with Obama? Things like that. You know, really pointed, drilling down questions. I have not said, you know, Cohen Democrat or Meadows Republican once during this entire thing, but I have referenced their questions. Actually, I'll take that back. I have called them Republicans or called them Democrats, but I never said that directly after their name. So it's not like I'm calling these people out point by point. But what I'm trying to say is, as you watch this on your own, you don't need me saying these things. You'll see it immediately. So I guess I'm just babbling. My apologies. Okay, let's go back to the top here. Mr. Cohen. Ms. Page, I'm sorry. Oh, no, we already did that. Affected any of the actions of Mr. Strzok, of you or anybody else within the Mueller Special Counsel investigation? Page, that's correct, sir. Cohen. Anything in the FISA applications that you know of that was not dealt with according to procedures? And Page, no, sir. Cohen, no nefarious activity? Page, no, sir. Cohen, and wasn't there some information that if you went too far in giving the court was given information, I believe, about the fact that somebody might have paid for the dossier, but that if they went too far, they might be outing sources or going beyond what is legitimate activity? Okay, so guess the party. Page, sir, I'm not sure I can answer that question in this setting. Cohen, and I'm not sure if I asked it right. Page, no, I understand your question. I'm just not sure. I'm really not sure what's been classified, what remains classified, and what's been declassified. So I'm not comfortable answering that in this setting. Cohen, and then you were asked about Mr. McCabe's memos and Mr. Comey's, and the fact that he made some notes about his conversations with President Trump. And to the best of your knowledge, he didn't do this with any other presidents. Is that correct? I think that's been his testimony. Yes, sir. Well, it's been your testimony too, my dear. Cohen, do you think in your history as an attorney, your knowledge as a human being, that the degree of the reputation a person has for truth and veracity might have something to do with the likelihood of somebody making a memo about their conversation with them? Page, I agree with you, sir. Cohen, so he wouldn't, if he had talked to Abraham Lincoln, he wouldn't have had to take a memo. Honest Abe. Jason, as I understand it, yes, this was a closed-door meeting, but I'm a little confused right now. Before I started pulling the page up to start reading today, I was sure it was a closed-door meeting, but I saw a reference to another session that was open door, and normally Congress does open door, closed door, open door. And I'm pretty sure I know that this is the second day of testimony, so I'm pretty sure this is the closed door testimony. She's not under oath, as I understand it, but it is closed door testimony. Hey, Ray. Hey, Ray. Hey, Ray. I have missed you greatly, sir. I have missed you greatly. For anyone who's interested, at the end of this video, I will give a hopefully brief, but perhaps not, description of why the channel has been dark for so long, and what I hope for the future of the channel. So hang around, and I will have that for you at the end. What I'll do is I'll finish reading this, and then I'll put up the banner sign for a few seconds, so you'll be able to know if you fast forward through that that's where the break is, and then after that break I'll open it back up again, and I'll just do a full camera on what's been going on. So stand by. That won't be too much longer. We're getting near the end here. Okay, so yes, Honest Abe. How long were you involved with the FBI? Page, I worked at the FBI for about 6 years. Cohen, and this was, how many years were you there during Comey's dictatorship? Dictatorship. That's a complete slip on my part. I'm sorry. Directorship. How many years were you there during Comey's directorship? Page, for all of his directorship. So for the 3.5 years that Director Comey was there, I was also an employee. That's not a long working relationship with the FBI, I don't think. 6 years for someone as high level as she is, or was, and certainly 3.5 years as a director, it's kind of short, folks. Just subscribed. Well, thank you, Jason. I appreciate that. Maybe I'll get back up over 2,800 now that I've put at least one video up this year. You know how YouTube shaves subscriptions off every month for people they feel are inactive, even if they're not. And so you wind up getting unsubscribed from a channel that you never told the channel you wanted to be unsubscribed from. But be that as it may, I deserve to have lost subs, being as dark as this channel was. So who knows? Tell a few of your friends and we can get back up over 2,800 and on our way to infinity and beyond. T-Series, watch your ass. Cohen, and you were there after he was fired too. Page, I was. Cohen, would you say the morale at the FBI went up or down after he left? Page, we were devastated by his firing, sir. Cohen, he was generally respected by members of the FBI? Page, he was respected and well-liked, and people believed in his vision for the FBI. So all of the leaking and running interference for investigations against people who the deep state liked. That's the kind of direction we were going in, sir. And hell-bent for leather, we wanted to stay that way. You were never there during the time Mueller was there, were you? Page, I was there for about the first year and a half of Mr. Mueller's tenure. Cohen, do you know what his reputation is among members of the Bureau for honesty and for diligence and for, hard work and caring about America? Not a leading question at all. Not in any way, shape, or form. And I'm not a lawyer, folks, but sometimes you can hear them coming. Page, his reputation for all of those things is strong. He is regarded as very demanding, but also completely honest, with integrity that is really unparalleled. Yeah, ask Manafort about Mueller's integrity. Cohen, in a lot of work that Peter Strzok had done at the FBI, particularly back in 2010, when he outed, I think it was, as many as 10 Russian spies, was a lot of his work centered in counterintelligence on Russia? Page, his entire career has been in the counterintelligence division, so his full 20 years at the FBI has been almost exclusively doing either counterintelligence or espionage cases, right? So counterintelligence is our effort to counter foreign adversaries here collecting against us. Espionage cases involve U.S. persons who have decided to turn, Cohen, join another team, Page, and work for a foreign power. Cohen, yeah, maybe go and sit next to Putin and say nice things to him. That kind of stuff. That's pathetic. Absolutely pathetic. Would you say, continuing with Cohen, would you say that if he had a driving force in his life and something that he was most concerned about, that it was protecting America and our country from Russian influence? Da, 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 da. Ms. Page, that is, he is a patriot, first and foremost, and he has devoted his entire life to defending the national security of the United States. And Russia poses probably the most pernicious threat to Western ideals and Western democracy. So, yes, see my previous comments about China. Mr. Cohen, I don't think I have anything else. Thank you. And, okay, you all remember this. And I'm not going to suggest you should get a Purple Heart, even though I'll probably be described as sexist for not doing it. Yes, we're going to describe you as sexist for not suggesting she get a Purple Heart. Rest assured, Mr. Cohen, you'll get yours. Mr. Cummings, thank you very much. Ms. Page, I thank you for being here, and I know it's not the most pleasant moment in your life. Here we go. During his testimony the other day, Agent Strzok said something to this effect, that while he may have had his own personal opinions about Hillary Clinton, and even his own opinions about Donald Trump, that it did not impact the investigation. In other words, when he was deliberating with his colleagues, it did not affect that. Do you believe that? Yes, sir. Mr. Cummings, and why do you say that? Page, because I was present for all of the investigative steps and for the decision-making that occurred on both investigations. And so I know the discussions that went on around them. I know the reasons behind the steps that we took. Certainly with respect to the Clinton investigation, there was not a single investigative step at all under any circumstances other than the July 5th statement made by the director that wasn't done either in conjunction with or at the direction of the Justice Department. If you're going to get me to believe that Comey stood there on July 5th, listed all the crimes that Hillary had committed, all the laws that she'd broken, then said, but she didn't have intent, so we're not going to prosecute her, even though intent is not in the statute anywhere, and other people have been prosecuted for this crime without doing anything near what Hillary did, without any intent at all. And that he went on to say that we're not going to prosecute her, thereby taking Loretta Lynch completely off the hook for following up on this investigation at all. There's no way you're going to get me to believe that that also wasn't coordinated with the DOJ. No way in hell. So there is no room for bias, Page continues, to the extent that it even exists in the first place, to have influenced official acts, because every single act was taken in coordination with a half dozen to a dozen or more people. People who were telling you there's no case because it's either unconvincing or unclear or unconstitutional. Therefore, no matter what evidence you came up with against Hillary, there would be no charges. Those dozen people. Mr. Cummings, can you understand, and I asked the same question of Mr. Strzok, Agent Strzok, Mr. now, and I practiced law many years, but can you understand why people might think when they read the text that it would be almost impossible not to interject those thoughts into the discussion? Ms. Page, I do understand that, sir, but I do think that we do not give up our right to have a view as to who is most qualified to be President of the United States simply because we work for the FBI or even because we are working on an investigation involving one or the other of them. Yeah, there's no reason you should recuse yourself, knowing your inherent and massive bias. And these were our personal views. They were views, particularly before July 28th, which entirely reflected our view of the dignity befitting the White House, of the decorum, and the way one holds oneself. I don't see how that is relevant at all to whether Hillary Clinton mishandled classified information 3 years prior. She's a private citizen now. We shouldn't have to hold her to the standard that we would an elected official. Once you're out of office, you can't be charged with breaking the rules. Why would that happen? And after July 28th, we were now concerned about whether there was a foreign adversary trying to work with the presidential campaign, after being told by Hillary to look into it. And so I think that the concern there is both understandable and recognizable. I guess the other thing I would say, sir, is that, and I've said this a number of times in response to other questions, we don't often like the people we investigate. And that is true whether we are investigating a pedophile or a fraudster or a terrorist or a drug dealer. We don't like criminals. We don't like people who we think are criminals. And you certainly thought Trump was a criminal, didn't you? And that does not ever, under any circumstances, pervade the activity that an FBI agent or an FBI lawyer or a DOJ prosecutor engage in. Yeah, they let Hillary off the hook because they were so unbiased. We are driven by a search for the truth. This is who we are as FBI employees. It is absolutely what pervades our every decision making. And if at any opportunity we saw somebody acting in a different way, we would not tolerate it. It's just not the way we operate. Mr. Cummings, you said something a moment ago, I think it was answering one of Congressman Cohen's questions, and I don't remember the exact words. I tried to jot it down. But you were talking about Russia and the threat of Russia. I forget the words you used. You said Russia was the greatest. Can you elaborate on that, please? Page. So it's my personal view that Russia poses probably the greatest threat certainly to Western ideals of many of our foreign adversaries. And we have vast foreign adversaries. But even the threats that are posed by China or by Iran or North Korea or others doesn't speak to the core of Western democracy, right? China wants to wipe us off the face of the earth economically within the next, I think, 30, 50 years. And that'll have no consequence whatsoever on Western democracy? Are you serious? Putin is a hollow shell. They only have oil as their source of income. They're completely overbalanced in the money that they spend on the military. They have no infrastructure. They have spies and an army and nuclear missiles. We should be afraid of the nuclear missiles. Now, if Russia joins up with China and put their armies together, we're in a world of hurt. We could not stand up to that, period. We would have to resort to massive bombing by indirect means. By that I mean things like cruise missiles, things like that, where we would not put pilots over the area if we could help it. But even then, that might come to that. We could not stand up against those two armies together. Our military infrastructure was gutted over the last 10 years. We're just putting it back together now. I'm sorry, 8 years. We're just putting it back together now. I'm sorry, that was my soapbox. You have, page continuing, you have in the Russian Federation and in President Putin himself, You have an individual whose aim is to disrupt the Western alliance and whose aim is to make Western democracy more fractious, and in order to weaken our ability, America's ability, and the West's ability to spread our democratic ideals. How democratic is the European Union again? I mean, that's the goal, is to make us less of a moral authority to spread democratic values. And how much of a moral authority is Europe right now? And I happen to think that this is the best country on the planet and that our values are universal values that can and should be spread across the globe. And that is not a view that is shared by Russia. And so every effort to sow discord, to make us fractious, to harm the Western and American way of life is a win for the Russian Federation. It is a win for President Putin. So it is my opinion, I am certainly not the world expert on it, but it is my opinion that with respect to Western ideals and who it is and what it is we stand for as Americans, Russia poses the most dangerous threat to that way of life. Okay, I disagree, but she's entitled to her opinion. But here's where you see, again, the softball questions being thrown in by the Dems. Republican questions make her answer specifically and sequentially what's happening. Democratic conventions allow her to pontificate, to wrap herself in the flag, to wrap her former lover Strzok in the flag, and protect them from the vicissitudes of their immoral actions and also of their incredible bias against Trump in starting the Trump-Russia collusion counterintelligence proceeding. Mr. Cummins, are you aware of any FBI investigations motivated by political bias? Never, sir. No. You never saw signs of that when you were there? No. Are you aware of any Justice Department investigations motivated by political bias? Not that I'm aware of, no. Okay, I'd like to ask this question. Are you aware of any Justice Department investigations that were influenced by political bias? Please say no so I can strap you to a rocket and launch it into space. Ms. Page, on February 2nd, 2018, President Trump tweeted, and I quote, "The top leadership and investigators of the FBI and the Justice Department have politicized the sacred investigative process in favor of Democrats against Republicans, something which would have been unthinkable just a short time ago. Rank and file are great people." End of quote. Do you agree that, okay, this was misattributed. This is Cummins. This is either Cummins asking this question or someone other than Cummins asking it. They have Ms. Page listed as the person that they're quoting, but this is obviously not her. This is a question for her. So I can't say for certain this is Cummins, but let's just assume that it is, since that's the person who's been questioning her at present. So he's quoting a Trump tweet, and he's going to have her go off on it. To continue, do you agree that, quote, "the top leadership and investigators of the FBI and the Justice Department have politicized the sacred investigative process in favor of Democrats and against Republicans? And can you explain why you feel whatever you feel?" Page, no, sir, that's not my experience. My experience is, as I've described it, which is that every person to a person, there are 36,500 of us, and we all care about doing things the right way. That is the reason that we have the authority that we have as the FBI to show up at your door in the middle of the night and to knock on it and to hope that you open. With 26 agents in full tactical gear, including guys in the canal behind your place in riverine boats and tactical boats, just in case you, as a 67-year-old man who's just been woken up out of his sleep, make a run for it, grabbing your gun and trying to shoot your way out of it. Oh yeah, and you've been indicted on a process crime, on lying to Congress. That kind of knock on the door. And the reason that we are able to do that It's because we have a reputation for honesty and integrity. And if we cannot continue to do that, if people question our motives and people question why we are showing up at their door in the middle of the night, we are all unquestionably less safe because of it. Sweetie, you did that to yourselves. Trump had nothing to do with that. You've done that to yourselves. Mr. Cummins, please tell me, why did you become an FBI agent? Ms. Page, so I've been a lawyer, sir, for the last 12 years. I am one of those nerdy kids who at 14 knew I wanted to be a lawyer, knew I wanted to serve, be a public servant. I went to a public school for law school in order to have less debt and lived at home so that I could not sort of take the route of a private sector job because I have always wanted to serve my country. Cummins, I take it this has been a very painful experience. Page, it has, sir. Cummins, do you want me to pause for a minute? Page, I'm fine. Do you want me to pour you some water, my dear? Perhaps massage your neck. Get you a foot bath. Page, I'm fine. Cummings, throughout your career at the FBI and DOJ, are you aware of any instances of the FBI and the Justice Department conducting investigations in favor of any party and against another? No, sir. Direct and demonstrable lie. She was involved in the mid-year exam investigation against Hillary Clinton. She was involved in the beginning of the Trump-Russia collusion counterintelligence investigation. She knows damn full well that both of those were influenced politically. Mr. Cummins, on May 22, 2018, Republican members of Congress introduced House Resolution 907. In that, they were requesting that the Attorney General appoint a second special counsel to investigate misconduct at DOJ and the FBI. So that was 10 months ago, 9 months ago, somewhere in there. And if you had looked at that resolution then, and then looked at what we know now about McCabe and the whole 25th Amendment brouhaha when Trump fired Comey before they impaneled Mueller, you'd be even more enraged about that not passing. At the bottom of the first page, the resolution asserts the following. Whereas there is an urgent need for the appointment of a second special counsel in light of evidence that raises critical concerns about decisions, activities, and inherent bias displayed at the highest levels of the Department of Justice and the Federal Bureau of Investigation regarding FISA abuse, how and why Hillary Clinton email probe ended, and how and why the Donald Trump Russia probe began. End of quote. Ms. Page, do you think there was an inherent bias at the highest levels of DOJ and FBI regarding FISA abuse? No, sir, there has not been. She's already said she wasn't very familiar with FISA and what went on there, and that even Strzok wasn't all that involved in it, except as a supervisory role. Cummings, is there any evidence of inherent bias displayed at the highest levels of DOJ and FBI regarding how and why the Hillary Clinton email probe ended? No, sir, and she's already said that there was, that the DOJ told them that there was no way they could indict Clinton because the law was either unconstitutional or unclear, and they knew better than that. Liar. Mr. Cummings, is there any evidence of inherent bias displayed at the highest levels of the DOJ and the FBI against Donald Trump as part of the Trump-Russia probe? Page, sir, no. The actions that we took in that investigation, at least in the time that I've been present for it, are exactly what you want the FBI to do when confronted with the risk that a member of a presidential campaign may be working in coordination with the Russians. There is no, at the outset of an investigation, we cannot tell you definitively what is happening, but you should have a predicate crime involved. But when it's a counterintelligence investigation, you don't need a crime. You just need an essence of a thought that something might be going wrong, which is what the Clinton campaign did when they said, play up the Trump-Putin bromance. Yeah, very, very good point, Jason. Very good point. No one apparently knew what was in that FISA, not her, not Rod. LOL, no reasonable prosecutor. Exactly, sir, exactly. Oh, thank you, Ennui. That's very nice of you. You've really stuck it out here. Good. That's I'm proud and a little bit humbled that you've been around this long already. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. I truly do. Let's see. Cannot tell you definitively what is happening. But the notion, this is Page still, but the notion that we should not have opened the investigation, that we should not have looked into whether or not this is a truthful or accurate allegation is just mind-boggling to me. It is precisely what you want your FBI to do. Investigate counterintelligence threats to this nation. What was the threat? What was the demonstrable threat, Page? You can't answer that. It doesn't mean that anyone has done anything wrong, not at the outset. It means that we need to look. And that's what we did. Mr. Cummins, are you aware of any actions ever taken to damage the Trump campaign at the highest levels of the Department of Justice or the FBI? Page, no, sir. Mr. Cummings, are you aware of any actions ever taken to personally target Donald Trump at the highest levels of the Department of Justice or the FBI? Page, no. How long is this going to take? Cummins, is there any evidence that any FBI or Department of Justice official took any actions biased in favor of Clinton or biased against Trump? Page, no, sir. That's, again, a total lie. Her previous testimony refutes what she just said. Mr. Cummins, not James Comey? Page, no. Andrew McCabe? No. Peter Strzok? No. Loretta Lynch? Not that I'm aware of. That's a nice dodge. Sally Yates? Again, same answer. Another dodge. Cummins, I'm sorry. Page, same answer. Rod Rosenstein? No. And Robert Mueller? No, sir. Mr. Cummins, is there any evidence that President Obama ordered any investigative activity that was biased in favor of Clinton or biased against Trump? No, sir. No evidence. It doesn't mean it didn't happen. That's a complete weaselly worded question there. That's a lawyer question. Is there any evidence? Well, not if they did it right. Mr. Cummings, is there any evidence that President Obama ordered a wiretap of Donald Trump or the Trump campaign? Page, there is no evidence of that at all, sir. Cummings, none. Page, none. Cummings, I take it there was some time spent trying to figure out whether there was truth to that. Page, at the department? Certainly, yes, sir. Cummings, on December 3rd, 2017, the president tweeted, quote, after years of combing with the phony and dishonest Clinton investigation and more running the FBI, its reputation is in tatters, worst in history, but fear not, we will bring it back to greatness. End of quote. Let me ask you something. I want to go back to something that Congressman Cohen asked you. He asked you about a certain period where he was asking you about the morale. And you said, and I don't remember the exact words, but can you describe, I'm sure you saw all these tweets, and when you get things like that, read stuff like that, how do you think it affected the morale? Can you hear the violin music in the background, everybody? Because I can. I will just say, sir, this is Page, that it is not consistent with my feeling about Director Comey or anybody that I know that I've spoken to about how we held Director Comey. The liar and the leaker. You all loved him, even after he was fired. It says a lot about you. He was widely liked. He was respected. I don't know whether he would want to work with me ever again, but I would work for him anywhere he went, any time in my life. He is a man of extraordinary intelligence and integrity, and it was a total pleasure to learn from him. Well, you certainly learned how to lie, Page. Mr. Cummings, do you agree with President's statement that the FBI's reputation is in tatters and is the worst in history? Page, well, it is now. Cummings, and why do you say that? Page, because we continue to be a political punching bag. Oh, that's it. You're a political punching bag. You don't deserve any of this. Poor you. Because some private texts about our personal opinions continue to be used as a broad brush to describe the entire activity of 36,500 individuals. That's a lie. That is a lie. Trump has never said the entire FBI is in tatters, that the rank and file are in tatters. He has said that you guys at the top ruined the FBI. And the fact that people have to stick up for the rank and file every time they talk about the rot that was at the top of the FBI and the DOJ, for that matter, and some people might argue still is, the fact that they have to do that shows you what Comey and McCabe and you and Strzok and Priestap and Baker and all those people did to the FBI. So don't cry me a river. Because we have been caught up, this is Page still, because we have been caught up in a place that we never could have possibly imagined, because all of us did the job that was asked of us. Asked by whom? Cummings, is that painful? It's horrendous, sir. Does it make your job harder to do? How can it? She's not there anymore. Yes, it does. How so? Page. Well, it's the very point that I was making. If we cannot be trusted to call on you, if we cannot be entrusted to protect confidential human sources, then we need to get out of the law enforcement business. Even if these confidential sources are liars? Because if we cannot be trusted to keep secrets, if we cannot be trusted to believe that what we do for the right reasons, then we have a very big problem in this country. Mr. Cummings, do you agree with the President's characterization that the Clinton investigation was, quote, phony and dishonest? Page, I would welcome the President to point out what we should have done differently in that investigation. It's as if she can't remember what she said a few hours previously, or has completely disregarded the fact that she said it. I don't know. She's already laid out the work that Loretta Lynch and the DOJ told them that the investigation was going to go nowhere, and leaned on them from the start. According to her, the FBI pushed back, but not pushed back enough to have made a difference. She even kibitzes about what finally deciding or a final decision means. It's so pathetic. And here she's saying that no, it's completely above board. I don't know what the President was talking about. Sorry about that voice. How we would have prosecuted beyond a reasonable doubt, given the evidence before us. I would welcome a conversation with President Trump about that. Just read Comey's July 5th statement, and there's your evidence, dummy. I'm really tired, Page still, of hearing all of the things that we should have done with nobody actually demonstrating to me why that would have resulted in a different conclusion with respect to the prosecution of Mrs. Clinton. She threw the DOJ under the bus earlier, and now she's rehabilitating them. Mr. Cummings, in your opinion, what kind of impact do statements like this have on the morale? Page, they're demoralizing. Cummings, of the rank and file. Page, they're demoralizing, sir. See, she can't even let him finish his pathetic, self-serving question before she jumps in with the answer. Mr. Cummings, and what is the impact of statements like these on the public's confidence in the FBI, and how does that impact our national security? Page, I'm not sure I can expand on that further than I already have, sir. Cummings, let me say this. I don't have anything else, but again, I think I just want to defend the truth. And were you about to say something? I was going to say, so do I, sir. Cummings, and I believe that. I believe that. And I think what I've been trying to get is to the bottom line. Thank you, Ray. Yeah, I wasn't trying to. It just came out that way. But thank you. You know, when I listen to some of the questioning, I try to figure out where we're going with all this. This is Cummings still. And it seems to me that when you told me, this body, this group of people, about your feelings with regard to Russia, it made it even more urgent that we get to the bottom line, or we won't have a democracy. And I want to thank you for your service. Going through difficult times is difficult. Thanks for the tautology. But in the end, I think if you survive it, you come out a stronger person. Page, let's hope so. Cummings, and I do thank you for your service and thank you for your testimony. Page, thank you. Cummings, all right. Recess. Now, in this regard, when I read the word recess, I don't think of the room emptying for a little bit, people stretching their legs, grabbing a drink of water at the cooler, or if you lived 40 miles north of me, you'd say bubbler, the water cooler. I see kids going out to play because that's what this hearing has become. This is recess for toddlers right now. This is pathetic. So let's see if we can rehabilitate things in the last few pages we have left. By the way, I'm going to just ask right now, it's bottom of the hour. Would anyone like to take a break for a few minutes, and then we'll finish up the rest of it. We've got, let's see, what page are we on here? 186. We've got 204. So that's what, 18 pages? 20 pages? 18 pages. So we don't have that much more to go. But if y'all would like to take a break, please let me know. I'd be more than happy to help you out. I'll wait for just a little bit, let you catch up. Okay, I'll take that as a keep going. Okay, so now we're back to Captain Parmenter, if I may. Let's go back on the record. It's 4:34, excuse me, I can't even read. It's 4:43 p.m. Questions by Mr. Parmenter. Miss Page, I appreciate you bearing with us. It's been a long day. We just have a couple more questions to ask. Page, no problem. Question, are you aware whether during the investigation, the mid-year exam investigation, there was any evidence that Secretary Clinton or someone on her behalf had transmitted classified material other than by email? Answer, how do you mean? Question, for example, answer, like a text or something, or question, by fax? Answer, oh. Question, or, you know, either Ms. Clinton herself, Ms.? Oh, thanks, Kat. Sorry about that, folks. Cat has a tail with a life of its own. If you keep that up, I'm going to make you get down. You can't be a star and move my camera around at the same time. But yeah, why are they calling her Ms. Clinton? She's married. Her husband's Bill Clinton. Mrs. Clinton, damn it. Or as I like to think of her as, inmate 4721B3. Or am I reaching a little bit too far? Answer, I don't know. I'm sorry. Question, so you wouldn't know whether or not she directed someone to do so? Answer, none of this is ringing a bell. I'm not saying that someone wouldn't have that information. None of this sounds familiar to me. Question, okay. Are you generally familiar with something called the President's Daily Brief? I am. And is that document generally classified? It is. At what level is it classified? It depends on the reporting contained therein, but it is certainly a highly restricted document that, broadly speaking, is classified at the top secret level. And would it be inappropriate to transmit via fax or unclassified email or to anybody who is not otherwise authorized to view it, correct? Answer, it could. It could go over a secure fax. It would depend on what system you were talking about, but in general, yes. Question, okay. Let me ask you a couple of following questions also about meetings that were held at the Bureau regarding the mid-year exam after the case had wrapped. Did you attend any meetings at the FBI in 2018 regarding the mid-year exam investigation? Answer, in all of 2018? Oh yeah, all the time. Oh, 2018? Oh, I'm sorry. No, I don't think so. No. When did you leave the Bureau? Do you recall the date? May 4th of this year. So I'm just going to show you an email that has been produced by the Bureau. Answer, oh, I'm sorry, yes. So this, I can explain, sorry. Oh no, what is this? So, sorry. When you talked about meetings at FBI, I'm thinking about meetings with the director about the investigation. I sort of managed or sort of coordinated, I don't know what the right word is, an effort to try to stay on top, however unsuccessfully, of all of the various... Oh, wait, I am gone at this point. Sorry, that's weird. Question, right. So this email, just for the record, is a May 17th, 2018 email to a number of the folks at the Bureau, including, well, you, even though you had left by this time, correct? Right. So my guess is that somebody just canceled the, let me take a step back. For some period of time, although I was not involved in this after probably May of 2017, for some period of time, starting in maybe the winter of 2016 through probably May of 2017, I tried to assist with the coordination within the Office of Congressional Affairs to sort of stay on top of the myriad requests coming from all the different committees for documents and for letters and sort of the congressional response and all of that. And so I wasn't in charge of any of it. I just tried to convene a meeting weekly. So, did I say that right? A meeting weekly. So as to try to not let the disparate people who were responsible for, well, this person's responsible for this portfolio, and this one has HPSIC, and this one has HOGR, and this one, right, so that we're all talking in one voice. We all knew what requests had come in. The responses were consistent, right? We were producing the right stuff to the right committees. So for a period of time, like I said, probably from December-ish 2016 through May 2017, I sort of led that effort. That's what this is. I think there was a sort of standing mid-year meeting that was once a week. I don't know whether this reflects that, to be honest with you. I just don't know. It seems like it. It's the right personnel who would have been involved in that. But by the date of this email, which is May 17th, 2018, I was not an FBI employee. Question. Okay, well, would you say this is canceling a meeting series? Answer. That's what it might be, yeah. So, question. And to your knowledge? Answer. And maybe it happened automatically, like when they disabled my account right after leaving. It's possible that, yeah, but this would have... Exactly. Is anyone following this? Because I'm lost. It's all I can do to keep reading without stumbling over all the ands and dashes and syntax errors. I'm losing it. This was a highly regarded, highly placed person in the FBI, mind you. She was the Deputy Director's lead legal counsel. And this is what she's been reduced to. But when the Dems were questioning her, you know, it was heart over the hand, hat over the hand, pledging the allegiance to the flag and singing the national anthem, all the while stitching a God Bless the USA sampler. Funny how that works out. By the way, don't adjust your hat like I just did by the crown. That's wrong. Because look what it did. Look what it did to my crown. You can see how it's kind of discolored. It's a little beat up. You want to do this. It's proper hat etiquette, folks. Remember that. Continuing with Page's word salad. So the message contained here could have been whatever the last time I sent a cancellation. You know, sometimes Outlook saves that last message because obviously there's no way for me to have typed this when I'm no longer an employee. Question. Correct. So, but as far as you recall, had any meetings of this mid-year exam follow-up team taken place in 2018? Answer. No, not to my knowledge. The effort has now been, after I left for special counsel, I never picked it back up. And so, to the best of my knowledge, it was the people in OCA who have been responsible for convening meetings for congressional response to the extent ones are happening. I just don't know. I don't have any knowledge of it anymore. Question. Okay. And that would have been when you left for special counsel in May of 2017. Answer. Correct. Correct. I never took. My point is, when I came back from special counsel, I never took it back up. Mr. Summers. Since we're at the close of the interview, just to completely switch subjects possibly, Mr. Meadows, before you close out, Lisa, you have mentioned that you worked for Andy McCabe. You were probably the closest individual, professionally speaking, that he interacted with. Is that correct? Page, certainly. Maybe one or two people might be equally close, but yes, I would say we were quite close professionally. Meadows. So one of the things that I guess I'm trying to put my arms around is, you know, as you hear different things communicated by different people, and we've had the opportunity to interview Mr. McCabe previously, but it appears that he, you know, lied to the FBI, lied to the IG, was caught in that, admitted it, and then kind of walked it back as it related to, just some of the story of sharing with the Wall Street Journal, some of the conversation with Matt Axelrod. And of course, he still hadn't written his book and communicated to the world that he had tried to oust President Trump with a bogus 25th Amendment dodge right after Trump fired Comey, but before they appointed Mueller, and that according to McCabe, Rosenstein was going to wear a wire and try to talk Trump into saying something incriminating to make it easier to knock him out of office. Interestingly enough, you may know this, none of that was in McCabe's book. He teased it heavily during all of his pre- and post-book tour, but it was never in the book. He can't even lie right. How do you, this is Meadows continuing. How do you, would you characterize that as something that you saw typically over your professional career? Page, I am constrained in what manner I can answer in light of other ongoing investigations, but I can say that I have never seen Andy lie ever under any circumstances. I have never seen Andy do anything other than make the right decision, and often the hard decision, even when it has been personally unpopular or professionally unpopular. I have consistently seen him make hard decisions because they were the right thing to do. I have consistently seen him be the fly in the ointment in the NSC under President Obama or in this administration because it was the right thing to do. Yeah, he always did the right thing, Lisa. Good, good. I wonder if they're going to ask her back to explain this latest little bit of McCabe's machinations. This page continues. The findings of the Inspector General are entirely inconsistent with the man I know and have worked with very closely for the last 4 years of my career. And I simply don't agree with those conclusions, sir. Meadows. So, and I thought that's where you would go. And I guess my question is, as it relates to some of the factual things that have now at least come out and had been reported. So do you see this as more of and at odds with Director Comey and Andy McCabe? Where's the conflict? Because, both of them can't be telling the truth, and obviously memos that you were talking about earlier tangentially may or may not relate. Page, so I really can't answer substantively because it's the subject of another ongoing activity. Meadows, so it would be fair to characterize that you believe someone else is not telling the truth. Page, no, I am. You'll be surprised to know that I develop strong feelings about things. And I am actually quite confident, although I've never spoken to neither Mr. McCabe nor Mr. Comey about this, I have a strong feeling that I understand where the disconnect happened with respect to what Director Comey thought they were talking about and with respect to what Mr. McCabe was talking about. Meadows, so you think it may just be a big misunderstanding? I do, sir. I do. It's a pretty big one, and so I guess where does, I mentioned earlier Mike Curtan, where does he come into all this? Because all of a sudden, Page, Meadows, and what is troubling with me is knowing that there are a number of unauthorized disclosures that happened. Page, I disagree. Meadows, hold on. That happened in Congress and happens at times in other agencies. Knowing that, as we've been involved in this, that the FBI, or specifically DOJ, has done a very good job of putting a narrative out there that is sometimes not based on truth, I guess the question I have is, what role did Mike Curtan, Director Comey, Andy McCabe play in the matter that we have, where we have to question a high-ranking FBI official that has now retired? Page, yes, I really want to answer that question because it is as good one. Give me a moment, please. I'm sure that's a typo there. It should be a good one. Give me a moment, please. Discussion off the record. And when it says discussion off the record, it means she's talking with her counsel. Ms. Page, Mr. Meadows, I agree with you that it is curious that there is no reference in the IG report at all to Mr. Curtan, particularly in light of what I reported, which is that both interactions with the reporter were done with Mr. Curtan, in coordination with Mr. Curtan and with Mr. Curtan at my side. So I cannot explain why there is no reference to Mr. Curtan in any testimony, if he did give any, in the IG report. Mr. Meadows, so it would be prudent for this committee to have Mr. Curtan come and testify to perhaps add some clarity in terms of what he said, didn't say? Page, I think that the U.S. Attorney's Office is probably adequately equipped to answer that question sufficiently, sir. Meadows, all right. Page, particularly, honestly, it's so tangential to Meadows, the core issue. Page, right. Meadows, okay. So there seemed to be great consternation, and that's me characterizing the decision to recuse himself, Mr. McCabe's decision to recuse himself in the final days of, I guess, when we reopened mid-year exam. It was apparent that he did not necessarily agree with that decision to recuse. Would you agree with that? Ms. Page, I would agree with that, and I agreed with him. I did not think there was a basis to recuse. Meadows, so it was that he was encouraged to recuse because of the appearance. Or why do you think he was encouraged to recuse himself? I mean, I've read a lot of back and forth as it relates to that, and it's still an unanswered question for me. Page, I know the IG report has an entire chapter on this. I haven't read it. That was ultimately what Director Comey asked him to do, and so, Meadows, but I guess did Director Comey ever tell him, or you, why he asked him to recuse himself? Page, I have never spoken to Director Comey about it. He did. Director Comey did speak to McCabe about it, obviously, because he instructed him ultimately to, or asked that Director Comey asked that Andy ultimately recuse. And I believe it's based on sort of appearance, but I simply think it was misguided and ill-timed. Meadows, so the reason why I ask is because you have an Andy McCabe that recused himself. You have an Andy McCabe that's been accused of lying several times to different people within the department, and what you're saying, that those are two unrelated events? Page, oh holy, yes. Meadows, and so one is perception, the other is perhaps more a direct action of Mr. McCabe. Page, I guess so, yeah. Meadows, all right, yield back. And for the record, I want to thank you for being cooperative. I want to thank you for doing the very best to answer as many questions as possible. And I think I speak on behalf of the entire committee that your willingness to share transparently has served you well and has certainly served this country well. Page, thank you, sir. Man, you really laid it on thick there at the end, Meadows. I don't blame you. Question by Mr. Baker. Did you say Mr. Catan was present at your side when you were having discussions with the Wall Street Journal? Correct. And Mr. Catan's position at the FBI was what? He was the head of our public affairs. He's an assistant director of the public affairs office? Correct. So did you, by the fact he was present, believe that this was an authorized and approved page? It was an authorized. This is why we didn't get to it, but it was 100% an authorized disclosure. I mean, the whole premise behind the IG report in the first place, I take issue with, because I was authorized by Deputy Director McCabe and by Mark Catan to engage with the reporter on this topic. Well, they may have given you the permission to do so, but it was still illegal. So an illegal act is not erased just because you were given permission to do it. You don't get dispensation for such things. So she continues. And so, the IG has come up with a different conclusion with respect to McCabe's inherent authority to authorize it in the first place. But I simply disagree with that. Question, so you believe it was authorized? Yes, it was authorized as far as I'm concerned. Question, you indicated in a previous round when there was a discussion about McCabe memos that Deputy Director McCabe had made some memos of his own. I had asked whether he had ever made any memos regarding his conversations or interactions with Director Comey, and you said, well, he took notes. I was referring to any kind of documentation he made for proof or clarity later on as to what he was told, not just taskings. Answer, got it. No, I am not aware of him ever having taken a memo as you have just described it with respect to his engagement with Director Comey. I just wanted to clarify that, like every single day, he likely was taking notes with respect to his interactions with Director Comey in the course of his official duties. And did you have conversations with Mr. McCabe that made you believe that he thought Director Comey instructed him or wanted him to have these conversations with the Wall Street Journal, even though there weren't memos to that effect or notes to that effect? I'm sorry, ask me that question one more time. Excuse me. Ask me that question one more time. Time for another drink. I kind of did an axed there. I'm sorry, ask me that question one more time. Question. Did you ever have a conversation with Mr. McCabe about the whole Wall Street Journal issue regarding whether the director knew about it? Answer. Oh no, we did not have any conversations about that. But the director need not have known about it. The deputy had his own inherent authority to engage with the media. So it's not something, my point is, it's not something he necessarily would have needed to seek the director's authority or approval for. Okay. Question. Is Mr. Catan still employed by the FBI? Answer. No, he's not. Question. And do you know why he left? Answer. Because he was long eligible to retire. Question. So he just retired? Answer. Yes. Question. Okay. One final question on an unrelated topic. Thank you, Ray. Yes. If you do think of it, if you have a moment to hit the thumbs up symbol, the like symbol here in the page, that would be nice. It'll help boost this in the algorithm, and more people will see it. We're close to being done, but it'll help it in the replays, and so that would be nice. Ray's always looking out for me. Thank you, Ray. And yes, 5,000 emails to Strzok, and she has trouble remembering. Absolutely. I know you made that point earlier, but that's very well put. I'll go back. Question. Okay, one final question on an unrelated topic. You had indicated your role as an assistant to Mr. McCabe was to go to different meetings and sort of bridge back what had happened in those meetings or something like that. Answer. Yeah. Question. Are you aware of any meetings or did you hear discussion about the sophistication level of Secretary Clinton as it related to handling of classified information or emails and communications in general, that she either was or was not sophisticated, and that would have been a part of the discussion regarding charging? Answer. I'm not sure if I can tie it to your last statement. It's possible, but I was part of the sort of general briefings that the director or the deputy director had as we gathered more evidence in the Clinton investigation. And I don't remember whether it came out of Secretary Clinton's interview or interviews with some of her senior staff or both. Well, it would have been kind of late to come out of her interview since she was interviewed just days before Comey put out his final statement on the matter on July 5th. I think she was interviewed on something like July 2nd or 3rd, so I doubt you heard about that. So I guess it would have been interviews with some of her senior staff, but that's me. I'm speculating. I could be wrong. But yes, we did come to learn that Secretary Clinton was not particularly sophisticated when it came to technology and the use of computers. I mean, she was not a sophisticated cyber user. That's why she wouldn't give up her BlackBerry illegally, which I believe was hacked within months of her taking over as Secretary of State. Question. Was there ever any evidence or any dissent in opposition to that view? Oh, not to my knowledge, no. You had mentioned earlier that Mr. Summers. Can I ask one question? Mr. Baker, sure. Question by Mr. Summers. What about her sophistication in terms of knowledge of classification and what classified documents look like? Oh, good question. Good question. She had that knowledge. Yeah, I don't. Question. Well, because in the 302 of her interview, for instance, she says that she wasn't aware of what the C in parentheses at the beginning of a paragraph meant. Thank you, Ray. Very kind of you as always. I appreciate it. Now this is what's beautiful. Some of you may remember this. In Hillary's interview with the FBI before they cleared her completely of all wrongdoing, they had asked her about the fact that there was a C in the parentheses at the beginning of a paragraph of at least one of the documents they found on her server or in possession on an unclassified system in general. And she said she thought that meant that it was a letter as part of a list. So that was the third in the list. Now you look at that document, And I'll bet you there's no A parentheses, B parentheses, anywhere before that C. That C may in fact be in the second paragraph. But that's her story and she's sticking to it. And remember, she wiped her servers with a cloth. So I'll repeat that. Question, well, because in the 302 of her interview, for instance, she says that she wasn't aware of what the C in parentheses at the beginning of a paragraph meant. Answer, yeah, I mean, that doesn't shock me. I mean, without the rest of the sort of header and footer and cover page. Should she have? Yeah, probably. But like on a single line randomly in the middle of an email, I don't find that terribly offensive to my sensibilities. But, question, I'm just bringing that out as an example of whether what you saw as her level of understanding of markings on documents and things. Answer, no, I have no personal knowledge of this, but given her history in government and her position, I would expect her to have had, some sophistication with respect to classification. That, and if I'm not mistaken, you have to take a class on classifications as part of your review to get your security clearance. Anyone who knows that I'm wrong about that, please correct me in the comment section. But I'm pretty sure I have that right. Mr. Parmiter, on what did you base the conclusion that she was not particularly technologically sophisticated? Ms. Page, I think both based on her statements about her understanding on how a server works and my understanding, and I never read her 302, but my understanding is, at least I don't think I did, is based on what was briefed to the deputy and the director, was like as technical questions were asked of her, she lacked the ability to answer them, as well as other people who were interviewed sort of had consistent statements with respect to her technical sophistication. So they couldn't have been lying, when in fact it's pretty obvious that all of them lied during their FBI interviews and that none of them were called out on it. Some were given more than one opportunity to be asked the same questions in follow-up interviews and lie again. And then finally be told, well, look, we know you're lying. So, what is it really? And they get a third lie, but they let it pass. Or they give them immunity and say, well, okay, we'll get back to you, and they never do. I'm sure none of those prior interviews ever lied about Hillary's technical knowledge, knowing what the stakes were. Never lied. This is an FBI lawyer, folks. You'd think she'd be a little less credulous about such things. Question by Mr. Baker. Are defensive briefings just for members of Congress, or would cabinet secretaries also get them if they were potentially targeted? Answer, oh, certainly. I mean, a defensive briefing would go to any person in a position to have sensitive national secrets and or interactions or exposure with people from foreign countries. Question, do you know if Secretary Clinton had any in her role as Secretary of State? Answer, defensive briefings? Question, yes. Answer, I have no idea, sir. Is it likely that she could have? Answer, entirely plausible, sir. But it would, again, like there's a difference between a general CI brief, which is you're traveling to this country, be aware of these things, versus, we understand that Joe Smith has reached out to you to schedule a meeting. You should be aware that intelligence suggests that Joe Smith is blah, blah, blah. Well, boy, you got to look out for Joe Smith and that blah, blah, blah stuff. I'm glad they are, Ray. I'm glad they are. And Ray just brought up Judicial Watch. I know I mentioned them not too long ago, but still, if you haven't subscribed to Judicial Watch yet, you've got to do so right away. Tom Fitton is an incredible spark plug of a man, and he lifts. You can tell he lifts. The guy's got a good pair of guns. He's in shape. And Tom Fitton is a bulldog. He does not let things go. And he has an entire staff of lawyers and personnel who are FOIA machines. And if it weren't for them, we wouldn't know about Hillary Clinton's private email server. They were doing FOIAs on Benghazi, and they found out from the State Department that the State Department didn't have all of Hillary's emails related to Benghazi because she had a private server. And that broke the door wide open. So Judicial Watch, folks, Tom Fitton, look him up. You'll be hooked. He does a weekly recap. You can't tear your eyes away from it. It's amazing. Let's see. Oh, yeah, okay. Joe Smith, blah, blah, blah. So, answer, the latter is a defensive briefing. Question, sure. In addition to the specifics of who might be trying to do something to you as a congressperson or cabinet member, is there a boilerplate that would almost go with any defensive briefing as to how a hostile actor might try to exploit your position, exploit a meeting? Answer, I would expect so, but I don't have personal knowledge of it. Question, would you guess if there was that part of that would be that Okay, I'm going to have to back up. Let me read this to myself first. Okay, all right. Would you guess that if there was that part of that would be that email communications and communications in general and weaknesses in networks could be an area for exploitation? Answer, I'm not really sure. That might go to a broader CI briefing, a broader counterintelligence briefing, a warning about spear phishing, a warning about, how cyber networks might be compromised. If only John Podesta and the DNC had gotten those CIs briefings a little ahead of time, the 2016 election might have been an entirely different animal. What was the password again? Obama 2012. My password's McGovern 1980. Oh, damn. I'm going to have to change it. So general CI brief. Sorry. Let me back up. Answer, I'm not really sure. That might go to a broader CI briefing, a broader counterintelligence briefing, a warning about spear phishing, a warning about, how cyber networks might be compromised. But in a defensive briefing, to the best of my knowledge, in a defensive briefing, it is usually much more specific and pointed information that we have. So in general, CI brief, sure, you might talk about how different foreign actors use different tools or vectors to do their work. But if you were conducting a defensive briefing, in my view, it's more likely that it would be specific and sort of narrowly described to the specific threat or risk that you're briefing on. Now, this is circling back to questions that he had before on basically why wasn't the Trump campaign given a defensive briefing when the FBI, quote unquote, got wind that there might be some Russian actors contacting the campaign, like say through Papadopoulos. But they were given no warning. They were given no defensive briefing because the FBI had obviously already determined that Trump was in this with Putin for the win, and they were going to get him. And so off it went, starting in July of 2016. So you don't know if someone who received a lot of defensive briefings would have their sophistication of weaknesses in email and servers enhanced by being told such a thing in defensive briefings? No, I don't know. Question. Finally, you'd mentioned earlier that Mr. AD Priestap was kind of a worrier. What was his relationship with Mr. Strzok? I know he would be Mr. Strzok's boss at the time that he's the AD. Answer, yes, they were very close. Question, very close? Answer, they professionally. I mean, they both had a lot of respect for each other. Both have had long careers in counterintelligence division, and so both respect each other's instincts and knowledge and experience working CI targets. So they had a very strong professional. Got ahead of myself. So they had a very strong professional relationship. Question, so no work tensions or no, sir. Issues about decisions made? No, sir. Okay, thank you. Mr. Summers, I'd like to ask you about an email chain. There's only one email on the chain in particular, but you can take a look at that document. I'm mostly interested in the email from Peter Strzok to you at 7:10 p.m. Ms. Page, 1 second. Mr. Summers, that email says we need all of their names to scrub, and we should give them ours for the same purpose. My first question is, who is there and them to your knowledge? Ms. Jeffress, it's a long article. Do you know which part of the article this relates to? I believe she's one of Page's counsel. Mr. Summers, I don't know which part of the article in particular it relates to. I'm just looking at the email from Strzok to Ms. Page, and it looks like, Ms. Page, I don't, Mr. Summers, she understood at the time at least what that was. Page, I'm not sure. I'm sorry. Summers, okay, what about scrub? There was a brief recess. Coming back on the record at 5:13 p.m. Ms. Page, I don't know what we're referring to, but that's usually a, let's see if we have any information in our holdings relating to these individuals. But I don't know which individuals we're talking about here. Question by Mr. Summers. Well, I took their and them, one question on this, their and them to mean another agency, and not, I took it to mean a list of their names. Could that, not the people in the article, not the names of people in the article, I took it to be an agency or a sub-agency. Answer, oh, I don't. I would have taken it to mean something in the article, but I don't remember this particular email as I sit here today. I don't remember. Oh, Obama 08. Okay, thank you, Ray. I just saw that. Thank you, Ray. I knew I was close, but I made it even more complicated than they had by adding a 20 to it. Oh, brother. So back to the answer. Oh, I don't. I would have taken it to mean something in the article, but I don't remember this particular email as I sit here today. Question. If you look up to the second email from the top, that's what Bill said. I suggested we need to exchange our entire list. Answer. I'm not positive, sir. I'm sorry. Question. Okay. All right. Mr. Summers. I think that's all we have for this. All right. So I think that will conclude our interview, and I want to thank you again for appearing both on Friday and again today. And that'll close the interview. Ms. Page, thank you. Whereupon at 5:14 p.m., the interview was concluded. And then there's a certificate of deponent interviewee. I have read the foregoing so many pages which contain the correct transcript of the answers made by me to the questions that are recorded, and that's where Paige would have signed it and dated it after she read through this. And there you have it, sports folks. That is the interview of Lisa Page by the Committee on the Judiciary in the U.S. House, Monday, July 16th of 2018. So as we were talking about earlier, there was a previous day's testimony. That would have been on the Friday, which would have been the 13th. Let's see, 15, 14. Yeah, the 13th. And as near as I can tell, that was an open door session. So there was no closed transcript. I was trying to look that up earlier today, and I ran out of time before I could track it down. Although I did not have a lot of lead time before I sat down and start recording, so I'm not saying you can't find it. But anyway, so there you go. Thank you, Uncle Bobbity. That's very kind of you. Very kind of you. I have great respect for you, sir. So any nice words I get from you mean a lot. And of course, the same with Ray and Jason. And who else did we have in here today? We had Ennui Blue. We had my dear wife, Picasso Knows. The War Kettle stopped by briefly. There's another channel you should look at if you're interested in UK politics. Drill down to a specific level. The War Kettle has a very interesting channel. A lot of really good on the street, man in the street reportage. So look to him if you'd like to get a real good feel for what's going on in the UK, in the mean streets. Let's see, who else did we have? Thomas Watvet. He was in just before we restarted. And of course, Aunt Kitty hashtag. Aunt Kitty, we love. It was very nice of her to stop by. There were a few others in the previous stream that I don't have in front of me right now. Y'all can look them up and give them a good round of applause in the comment section if you would. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to put this on the splash screen for about a minute and a half. I'm just going to take a quick walk around the room to get my blood flowing again, and then I'll come back and give you all a brief on where I've been and where I hope to be in the future. So I'll put that up so anyone who is fast forwarding through can find it easily. But I shall do that and be right back. Okay. Oh. Put my earbuds back in. They're not really good for hearing the monitor channel per se, but they really kick in when I clip, when I hit too high a note or overmodulate, so they help me back off. Not that I do that every time. As you can see, I changed. Things were getting a little gamey in here with the door closed, even only part way, so the cats can move in and out, because they will yell if you close them out completely. Any of you who know cats or dogs know that they're like that around a closed door. So with the heat of the computer being right next to me, and this being a gaming computer that throws out a lot of heat, you can imagine that, let's just say my early morning ablutions did not hold over till the end of the day. So, where have I been? Anyone who's looked at the catalog knows that I haven't been around since last fall. And I'll give you a couple answers for that. First, after the last video, I got busy. There were 2 trips out of town within a couple weeks of each other, and I just didn't have time to put together a video from getting back from a trip, getting everything put back together, clothes washed, unwinding, and then gearing up for another trip. Same thing. So about a month and a half was just busy. After that, now the holidays are coming up, so I'm quote-unquote busy for that. But also, I'll be perfectly honest, I had gotten a little lazy. I had gotten used to not being on the channel, and I just took the time off. Now, that's not bad. I understand that. I could have done an insanely better job of communicating that to the regulars here, to anyone who stopped by the channel and wanted to know what was happening, but I didn't. And that's part of the laziness for sure, because I haven't answered or responded to a comment except for 1 or 2 since the last video. And you know that's very much unlike me. So there's that. Now the holidays are over. Well, we had another trip. By the way, we went to New Orleans, and if you've never been, you have got to go. I don't recommend going anytime around Mardi Gras. It's insane. We did not. We went the second week in January, which was just before the early festival started. And we got a great hotel for a great price. We were right off Bourbon Street, right off of Canal Street. We were able to walk to a large number of things, and as you know, I have artificial hips, and my wife has bad knees, so we're not, the walking kind of people, but we still did really well. And there are also streetcars that go everywhere. In fact, the oldest electric streetcar, continually operating streetcar in the world, is in New Orleans, and our hotel was right on that line. It was just fascinating. Everyone there is terrific. Everyone had a smile. I never had a bad interaction with anyone. I had one bad cigar. That was the worst of my trip. I had a bad cigar. If that's all that happens to you on a trip out of town, you know it was a good time. So there's that. So now we're back from our trip, and I get sick. And I got really sick. It was the same type of symptoms that I had last spring when I had to shut down for quite a while. It turned out not to be the same reason as last spring. In fact, we still don't know what happened, but it seems like I'm on the backside of it now, because I was not sleeping at all. I had about 2 nights sleep, 2 decent nights sleep within 6 weeks. The rest of it was a couple hours here, a couple hours there. I couldn't function. I mentioned to someone earlier, I probably haven't shot in almost 4 months. That's how busy and sick I've been. So, but yeah, I need to get back on the channel. And as I was going through this in my head the other day, I was thinking that it would probably be quite a while before I did another video. But as I did this today, I realized that I really miss it. I miss you guys, I miss the interaction, and I miss putting myself out there. Now, I have gotten into a habit of consuming a lot of media lately, and I will have to back off on that, but I can do that. I can do that. I'm also going to have to get back into the pool because I've been out of it for quite a while. As you can see, I've put on a fair amount of weight. I'm not happy about that, but that's what happened. I can change that. We can always change that. So anyway, what will I be doing from here on out? I don't know specifically. There's a lot coming up politically that I am very interested in, so I may be doing more of that. Like today, I fully intend to read the Peter Strzok transcripts when they drop. So be on the lookout for that. If they drop today, I don't know of it, but if they have, then you'll see me Monday. And in fact, if they drop early Monday, you'll see me Monday afternoon. If not, then within a reasonable time afterwards. As far as women's health video goes, I have not been paying attention to that like I used to. There have been certain videos that have come out that I should have commented on, but because of how I was feeling or where I was at the time, I wasn't able to. I'm going to work very hard to make sure that doesn't happen again. Of course, feel free to send me emails. I'm not on Twitter, but I am on Minds, and I am on Gab, and I am on BitChute. So you can contact me at any one of those. The links to those will be in the descriptions for these videos and for all of my videos. I think you can find them for all of them. You can get a hold of me that way if you see an item or items that you would like to see covered. I'd be happy to look at them. I don't get to all of them. Sometimes they really excite me, but I manage to screw it up somehow, or I'm not able to bring it to screen. But I am interested in hearing from you, so please do that. I appreciate it. So that's basically it. I don't want to be a stranger as long as I have. We do have some things coming up. I'm going to be gone in mid-April. In fact, April is shot. I have so many things happening in April, it's basically a dead month. But there's still plenty of time between now and then and afterwards to reconnect with you guys and keep the channel going strong. So for those of you who stayed this long, my deepest gratitude. For those of you regulars who have stuck with the channel, even through this long, dark period, my even greater gratitude. And for those new viewers who are just coming on and think, this place might be worth stopping in from time to time and seeing, I'm very happy that you think so. And I hope to return that hopefulness with a bit of fair-minded video or videos, and let you choose for yourself to see if it's worth staying. So with that, I wish you all a good night. Have a great weekend, and I'll see you soon. Thank you again. Bye-bye.